Grady. Thank you all for being here today. I do apologize for being a few minutes late, kind of tied up in another meeting, and sometimes that happens. Mr. Secretary, good to have you with us. And I was meeting with another secretary, so I don't mean you any disservice. Senator Hall has worked very hard on this particular study. I do believe it is a study that needs to take place, and so I know we have a number of those who are testifying this afternoon, a number of good questions, and so at this time I'll turn it over to Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for agreeing to hear the study, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I appreciate both of you being here today. This is my first interim study that I've ever conducted in my entire life as a state senator, and boy, did I jump into it. We've got a great crowd here today and a great lineup of speakers. I really believe that everybody will have a little takeaway from this session. So nearly 15 years ago now, House Bill 1176 was passed in special session with unanimous bipartisan to build on previous legislation by providing an annual increase in roads funding and set in motion a reversal of long-standing stagnant funding for Oklahoma's transportation system. The Roads Fund, of course, supports ODOT's highly successful 8-year construction work plan. This legislation also benefited county roads and bridges through the creation of the CIRB Fund. Designed to take the politics out of county road project selection, CIRB funds a 5-year plan of major county road and bridge projects overseen by ODOT and Circuit Engineering Districts, or CEDs. Through it all, the bill's author says that a group of counties are able to fund major projects that could never have been built by a single county alone. It's my understanding that all CIRB funds are allocated to the critical need across our state, fixing the worst of the worst first, as counties are required to prioritize and cooperatively apply for funding on a per-project basis. As is always the case, some are happy with the program, and others see opportunity for program improvements. There are some county commissioners who believe that the CIRB award process has become burdensome, confusing, and overly engineered, adding unreasonable expense and time to projects. As such, this side believes that the CIRB program would be better and more efficiently managed by the boards of county commissioners of each county. Conversely, other county commissioners have reported to me that most projects are multi-year, requiring engineering plans, cost estimation, right-of-way acquisition, involvement impact studies, utility relocation, and finally construction. Each step requires time and cannot be accomplished without stable, predictable funding, which is accomplished using the CIRB rolling 5-year plan. My goal today, Mr. Chairman, is to have an open and transparent review of the CIRB award standards and program successes and failures, and to help my colleagues better understand the ins and outs of our county roads and bridge funding. At this time, I'd like to invite our first presenter to the podium. We are joined today by State Auditor Inspector Cindy Byrd. Cindy Byrd is Oklahoma's 13th State Auditor and Inspector and is the first woman elected to this statewide elected office. Prior to being elected, she served as Deputy State Auditor Inspector for Local Government Services and also served as Director of the County Audit Division. Auditor Byrd has been a good friend to me as I try to get my arms around county government and county road and bridge funding. Auditor, it is great having you today. Thank you for taking the time to speak during this interim study. We'll hear from you now. Mr. Chairman, do you mind if she speaks from the desk?
Not at all. Auditor, you're recognized. Go ahead and present.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Hall, both for letting me come today and talk about the funding. I hope that I had enough packets for all of you, and for anyone who didn't receive this, I'm happy to email you the information. My role in this interim study was only to explain the funding. So I wanted to take you back just a little bit and even talk to you about the county highway funding, because I think it's important to know how little that funding is and how it doesn't go as far, which also explains the need for this CIRB program. So if you'll look at your first slide in your handbook that I passed out, This shows all of the different fundings that go into, the funding streams that go into the highway fund. You know, we have the money from the State Department of Transportation from CIRB projects. This might be for right-of-way acquisitions that the county may have paid for and got reimbursed. We have all of the motor fuels that come through the Oklahoma Tax Commission that's remitted monthly to the county highway fund. There are a couple of different programs from CEDs that can help fund the county highway program. The REAP program, the Rural Economic Action Plan, those are also projects that can be done. They're usually small amounts. Other revenue might be from, you know, sale of county equipment, insurance, road crossing permits, and even sometimes federal grants if a county is lucky enough to get those funds. The highway fund is typically used just for salary of the hands and maintenance and operation of the roads, you know, just keeping them, trying to maintain the current situation. It's not, there's not a lot of funding here for any kind of capital projects. If you'll look on the next page, on page 2, the pages are numbered. These are the OTC remittances to the county highway fund monthly, and I want you to look very closely at this last V shape. This is what happened to the county highway fund when the price of oil plummeted and the pandemic hit. As you see this V go back up, this is what you legislators did whenever you put 35% of the CIRB funds directly back into the county highway fund. So you can see what a big help that was to county government and how that helped them continue on. And I know that the county commissioners were very appreciative of that. If you look at the next page, this is just simply a listing of the counties. As you know, the CIRB program and some of the county road funding is put out by mileage and population. I thought it might be good to have a quick reference of each county's mileage, population, and the OTC payments that they received by the year, and this is for fiscal year 2020. While today that may not be something you need, it would be a good reference point in the future. As we flip on, I'm sorry, I'm not staying up with my graphs here. Okay, this next chart is just a funding of the state CED board. As you can see, they also received some of the motor fuel taxes, the CBRI funds. During fiscal year 20, $4.9 million was remitted to them, but they're responsible for remitting that on out to the CEDs with just keeping a small percentage to help with administrative cost. They also handle the DEQ solid waste program. There's a small fee of $35,000 retained at the state CED board, and the rest is remitted to counties. The ETR fund is also handled by the state CED board, and they received the interest from that in fiscal year 20. That was $140,000. And then, of course, they get some very minimal auction fees. So this is the funding flow for your state CED board. Moving on to the next page. This is the funding flow for your circuit engineering districts, circuit engineering districts 1 through 8. So they also receive the CBRI funds that I showed you on the previous page that is remitted from OTC to the state CED board and then on down to the CEDs. They receive some of the auction fees, of course, interest on investments. They receive some of the CIRB funds if they have a professional services contract with ODOT. So they would receive some of the fees for engineering services, inspection services, and whatnot. At the top, you'll also see revenues received for other activities such as sign shops, equipment rental, construction crew, material lab testing, and so forth. So those are some of the things that directly fund your circuit engineering districts 1 through 8. A spreadsheet on the next page shows you the funding by circuit engineering district. Now, if you'll look, you'll see asterisks behind some of the numbers. This means that they have a professional services contract with ODOT, as mentioned on the previous flow chart. You can see the different revenues. The ones who do have those professional service contracts receive some of the CIRB funding. You'll see that on line 3. The ones who do not, of course, is 1, 5, and 6. This is just to give you an overview of the money flowing through each individual circuit engineering district. And then lastly, we get to the CIRB funding flow, which is what Senator Hall asked me to present. I presented that earlier information just to give you an understanding of how what's available to a county for road construction, highway funds, how that money for CIRB flows to the state CED board, and then on down to the CEDs. So the actual funding flow, what happens with your $120 million that you appropriate to the CIRB program, OTC collects this through the gross production and motor fuel taxes, and they put it in a revolving fund with the state treasurer. Now, all projects have to be approved by the Department of Transportation. So as those are approved and a CED or a vendor starts a project, they can submit their claims to ODOT, who is responsible for approving those. And then once ODOT has approved that, it goes to the state treasurer's office. The state treasurer's office will then pay whatever ODOT has authorized, and those payments go out to vendors, or it goes out to CEDs 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8, who have professional services contracts. Now, that was a very speedy source or explanation of how all of those funds flow through, but that gives you an idea of what types of funding flows, what types of revenues are there, and how this is impacted by these programs. So again, Senator Hall, thank you for letting me explain that. I want to, commend the county commissioners and the CED managers and Randy Robinson on all they do for these projects.
Thank you, Auditor Byrd, for that presentation. We want to do our best to stay on the timeline. I want every speaker that is here to be able to have time. But if there are any questions that come up that are really appropriate to any presenter's presentation, we'll go ahead and take those at this time from any of our members. And if not, we'll circle back around for a Q&A at the end of all presentations. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'll just see if there's any questions by any of our members.
Members, if you have any questions, please indicate, and Senator Hall will be recognizing each member to speak if you have questions.
Auditor Byrd, thank you very much. I know you have to step out for a few minutes, but I understand that you'll be back for the Q&A session. Thank you very much for being here. Our next presenter today is well known as the father, quite frankly, of CIRB and CEDs. I got to know Commissioner Leota when he made a visit to my office, where I had quite a few questions related to the early days of the program. And through our discussion, I kind of got the feeling that what he intended to happen legislatively, it took on a little bit different form over time. And so I asked that he would join us today and give us a presentation on what he viewed the original intent of the 5-year plan and the purpose and use of circuit engineering districts. So with that, Mark Leota is currently the Oklahoma Workers' Compensation Commissioner and was a member of the Oklahoma House of Representatives from 1996 to 2006. Commissioner Leota, and I'm fine with you speaking from would you prefer to stand? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Hall, members of the committee. As I was thinking about speaking today, I thought I might need to give a little bit of a preamble. With what I'm going to say here today, some of my old friends might be my new enemies and vice versa. But Senator Hall asked me to come give my understanding of our intent at the time. It's been 14 years, and I recognize things change, the wheels keep moving, but I'm speaking from, kind of picture me a voice from 14 years ago. I'm Mark Leota. I was the House Appropriations Chair for Transportation and General Government in 2004 and 2006. And I was asked here today to discuss circuit engineering districts and how they related to my road plan of 2006. My Senate co-author was Senator Frank Sheridan. I think I need to give you some history, because I don't recognize a lot of you folks, some history that we were dealing with at the time. Let's start with 1997. I was a freshman legislator from Tulsa, and near the end of my first session, I, along with every other House member, was directed to go to the House Lounge, where we found big maps spread on the tables, and I was given the illusion of helping decide where my portion of that year's road funding would be spent in my district. So imagine all House members working their way in and out of the House Lounge, looking at maps and identifying where they wanted money spent in their district. I could not think of a worse way to manage a road system. This was a political spoils system. It was not a transportation system. By 2006, Oklahoma had not spent any new money on state road maintenance in almost 30 years. Funding had remained flat at around $200 million annually, which in effect was an annual cut as costs continued to rise. Much of the system, which was designed for a 50-year life with maintenance, was now up to 80 years old with little maintenance, and it showed. Oklahoma was consistently ranked at the bottom among the states for road and bridge quality. Basic transportation funding was so poor that if we had not spent new money on road maintenance the very next year, we would have lost our eligibility for federal matching funds. That's how bad it got. And the 8-year plan would have died in its infancy. We were determined to find a way to reverse Oklahoma's tremendously inadequate road funding. Since we're here to discuss circuit engineering districts and counties, I won't go into the specifics of what we did for the state other than to say we began the process to double the state's road funding without increasing taxes, without increasing debt. We took no money from other priorities. We prioritized replacing or repairing the worst bridges first. We created an emergency bridge fund and funded it. We redirected all remaining fuel tax from the general revenue to roads and bridges. And most importantly, we voluntarily removed the legislature from the road project selection process, instead leaning on ODOT's engineers to determine the system's maintenance needs. That was an enormous change and a continuing miracle every 2 years that the legislature continues to keep itself out of the process. So that's the state. That brings us to the counties. One political reality that we faced, other than finding new money, was that if we were going to increase state road funding, we had to include something for the counties. You can't give something to OU without giving something to OSU. That's just how that works. At the time, the county system received about $185 million annually from the state's CARTAG revenue. Believing that CARTAG revenue should be spent on roads and bridges and not sent to the general revenue, our bill increased the county share of CARTAG revenue, doubling their funding by the end of the third year. That resulted in $185 million new dollars for the counties annually beginning in 2009. But it made no sense to divide that funding by 77 counties or 231 county highway districts. Whether we base the division of funds on road miles or population or land area, however we divided it, it made no sense because the focus needed to be on projects, not political subdivisions, with a long-term plan and a way to measure results. The driving public doesn't generally know if they're on a county road, a city street, a state highway. All they see is need for improvement. The long-term crying need in the counties was for the big projects. for which no county could ever hope to accumulate the funds to design, to buy right-of-way, to move utilities, do the environmental studies, buy the materials, or pay the construction and labor costs. It was our intent that these state funds would be for projects like large bridges that can cost over $2 million in a county bridge, bridges between counties, and bridges connecting to other states, miles of shoulder installation across rural Oklahoma, all the projects that have waited decades and had no real hope of ever being funded. I think the first one, Secretary Gatz, was in Tillman County, the bridge between Tillman County and the state of Texas. For decades, the state of Texas had offered to fund their half of replacing that bridge. But it wasn't on the state system, it was a county bridge, and Tillman County had no money to do anything with. It sat there 80 years at least, needing repair. It's one of the first projects that the CIRB program replaced. Remembering that these are state dollars and not county funds, we needed a way to hold the funds and distribute them by project, not by political subdivision. So our plan was that ODOT would hold the funds and the counties would prioritize dollars and projects within their district and apply for them on a per project basis. The total new dollars would be divided equally among the 8 transportation districts. As a Tulsa legislator, I knew this would disproportionately benefit the rural counties, but that was okay, as that's where the maintenance needs were. They have more county road miles and bridges and far fewer dollars for maintenance. That's just their reality. There needed to be a clearinghouse for the projects and a way for smaller counties to have a real chance to compete. This is where the circuit engineering districts came in. CEDs were not specified in the bill. The discretion was left to ODOT to identify the mechanism for selecting projects. Secretary Gary Ridley and Director Mike Patterson and I verbally agreed the CEDs, as they largely mirrored the 8 transportation districts, would be the logical support for counties to communally develop and prioritize projects, identify and pool their funding along with federal match dollars and tribal road dollars, and select projects which alone individual counties would never have the ability to tackle. Additionally, to help ensure the CED's ability to support this effort, we increased their administrative funding and allowed them to keep interest earned on the funds they had on hand. The thought was CEDs would act in the best interest of all the counties within their district, drawing on the county highway departments to provide the engineering and other technical support which some counties simply cannot afford. Perhaps annually contracting for services no county in the district could provide and be the point of contact for ODOT for projects. The bill allowed the counties to accumulate funds up to 5 years for large projects. It's the only way they were going to be able to get the money on hand. And to work with the tribes to access their federal transportation dollars. It's the only program I know of where you can take federal dollars and use them to match federal dollars. This became the framework for the CIRB and the county 5-year plan, which is similar to the state's 8-year plan. Of course, I knew most counties would hate this administrative plan at first, and they did, because it didn't provide them with a windfall of cash up front. And having served 8 years at Tulsa County after I left the legislature, I understand that. The highway departments are starved across the state. Tulsa was flush compared to Nowata County and Tillman County and the little guys that just don't have the funds. They don't have enough funds to pay folks to go to work for them. But I believe most of the counties have come around to the long-term benefit of focusing on projects instead of cash to political subdivisions. It has proven itself out. So now I need to talk about what was not foreseen in our minds as we put the bill together. Mr. Chairman, I was asked to present what was the legislative intent at the time for this plan and compare it with the results after almost 15 years in place. First, I think it's very clear to any observer that this plan has been tremendously successful beyond our imagination. Secretary Gatz tells me when he's flying across the state, he can look down and see these projects because they are done to such a level that they stand out in the countryside. I recognize perhaps a flaw in my plan was that I did not consider the growing rural suburban areas and their growing needs. But that was not the purpose of the plan at that time. The purpose was to fund the impossibly large projects for all counties and finally address decades of deferred basic maintenance for every county system. I'm aware that it can make sense for CEDs to provide for counties what, in some cases, the private sector cannot efficiently provide, especially in the most rural, least densely populated areas. But it was never contemplated, perhaps only by me, that CEDs would become an enterprise with anything other than basic clerical staff. It was never intended that they would build offices or warehouses or manufacturing plants or man construction crews or actively compete with the private sector in providing materials or services. And some of this is happening. It was also not contemplated that CEDs would unilaterally change their boundaries or begin strategically organizing themselves around the money. And I've heard discussions of this. This is a dramatic change. This can dramatically alter the effect of ODOT's current administrative plan for these state dollars and deprive the neediest counties of the benefit of these maintenance dollars. And I think it's important to recognize here that nothing in statute, at least in my bill, mandated ODOT use the CEDs. And if it no longer makes sense, then ODOT can devise a more logical way to manage and distribute these state dollars for counties. I believe this would be a tremendous loss for the state, as the CEDs, as they were originally organized, made tremendous sense as administrative support for the CIRB. To summarize, the plan was for CEDs to be a support organization for the counties, largely staffed by the counties, work with ODOT to administer these new state dollars for county use, and focus on the projects that no county could tackle alone, not become a new layer of government with its own growing costs and infrastructure. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Questions by any of our members? Commissioner, if you don't mind, I would like to just kind of take you back to 2006. You indicated that the CEDs would be the logical support for ODOT to administer the CIRB program. So it's my belief then that CEDs were in existence already at the time. What was the intent or the purpose of the CED program prior to CIRB?
My understanding at the time was to provide generally engineering services and those kinds of services that counties didn't have, especially the smaller rural counties, might not have in place.
So it's weird not to ask for follow-up. I appreciate you letting me do this, Mr. Chairman. So you have the CEDs that we're providing support to counties for programs, particularly those counties that may not have the ability to have their own support, the support team there. So now we need them for the engineering and the technical support for for programs within the 5-year plan. Correct?
I'd say we need them to coordinate those services amongst the county, amongst the counties within their district.
Okay, so knowing what you've seen them grow into and some of the other functions that they're performing, I think you indicated in your testimony that now they have buildings that you didn't intend, they're providing different levels of technical support. Do you feel like that at any point some of the project awards are predicated on the need to use the CED services?
I'm not aware of any specifics. I've heard discussion of that kind of thing going on, and that's certainly not, that is not in any way what was intended.
I'll have some questions for Secretary Gatz and for our representative from ACO in just a few minutes. But I guess my final follow-up to you would be, knowing what you know today, do you still stand ready to and believe that the CED is the appropriate group to be able to help push these projects and get the awards under the 5-year plan?
If they are still districted the way that generally mirrors the state transportation districts, since that's how the funds are divided, then that makes perfect sense. Once they start, if they do, reorganizing themselves according to other concerns, well, that kind of blows up the system. It eliminates the logical structure that was in place when we put it in statute.
Senator Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for this idea. In my district, which is 9 counties, they have done projects that these counties would have never been able to accomplish without this. And I want to say thank you. As far as, some of the comments that you said, that the CED districts have grown and maybe, I don't want to say overshot, but have grown a lot larger and are doing things that that you did not intend, or the intent of your language. But is that a bad idea? Is my question.
And I appreciate the question. My understanding is that the CEDs are not operating in a standard way across the state. One may be generally operating the way it was 14 years ago, while another has taken on other interests, other efforts that go beyond what was intended. And as I stated, I think there are specific situations where it makes sense for a CED to either contract or even provide a service or a material that the private sector can't reasonably or efficiently achieve. And so, sure, there are specific cases across the state, we're a varied state, where it just makes sense for a CED to do something a little different. I think that potentially raises the idea that there needs to be some kind of a standard operating method across the CEDs so that they know what they can do, what opportunities are in front of them if they have a different situation.
Follow up. Thank you. So if you're in a local elected position as a county commissioner, and your resources are very, very short to cover the miles that you have to cover. They're trying to figure out the best use for their taxpayer dollars. And if they can use, and this is probably more of would you agree, if they can use the CD districts to make their signs and save some money, or they can use the CD district to utilize the taxpayer dollars the best that they can, wouldn't you agree that would be the best way to use it, to utilize the CD districts, that it's grown outside of what you first thought?
And sure, I don't have, what's the phrase, an author's, I forget. I recognize that over time, as districts address issues that are specific to their area, they're going to try different things and do things that make sense for them. That's why we're here. Basically, that's why legislators are here. I think it brings importance to the thought that perhaps there needs to be some standards across CEDs that gives them an understanding of what they can do and what opportunities they have in front of them. But it lets the legislature hold down moving into areas that are not the current legislature's intent.
Senator Montgomery for a question via Teams.
Thank you, Senator Hall. I want to fill that for Senator Montgomery. Commissioner, thank you for being here. I appreciate that a great deal. You're always willing to share your knowledge and expertise, and I have appreciated that a long time. Senator Montgomery is asking a question based on your testimony that the CEDs followed along the regional structure of ODOT. Senator Montgomery's question is, can ODOT's existing regional structure absorb the CED responsibility and design a similar plan? In your opinion, and maybe Secretary Gatz, whenever you're speaking, if you could address the same thing. Commissioner.
That idea I've heard discussed. I know that that ODOT has a county program that if it were to be combined with the CEDs is a possible way for the state to.
About CEDs, and I could think of no better person to come speak on behalf of the role of CEDs and the statewide CED board than our good friend Randy Robinson, who is the executive director of the statewide CED board. And you will see him a lot in our Capitol halls as he works very closely with ACO. And so, Randy, thank you for being here today. And at this time, we'll entertain your testimony.
My name is Randy Robinson. I'm Executive Director of, it's easier to say the Statewide Circuit Engineering District Board. It's actually the Oklahoma Cooperative Circuit Engineering Districts Board. And Chris is handing and passing out some information in front of you. There's 3 different documents there. The first one is a map, and we'll start with that and then kind of come back to it later. But circuit engineering districts are shown there on that map, 1 through 8. You have 1 county commissioner from each of those counties serving on the CED district board. You'll see a map there also included there in the left-hand portion of ODOT field divisions, and we'll get into that. But you have 1 commissioner, and then that commissioner serves on the CED board, and that commissioner that serves on behalf of his county then they as a board elect what they want to be involved with. They have a president, vice president, and secretary treasurer. That president of that CED then serves on my board, which is 8 members then, and we meet at the Association of County Commissioners once a month, as well as most of the CEDs. They are by statute, and they are also a political subdivision of the state. So that's this single page. We'll get back to it. It's the front and back. The next stapled document is multiple pages. We do not have time to go through all of it, but it is a document that is handed out yearly to the statewide CED board.
Mr. Robinson, can I interrupt you for just a quick second? So I just wanted to tell the folks that might be tuning in at home that all of these handouts are viewable online, except for the one that we're working from at the moment. But staff is getting that loaded up, and so we'll have that online as soon as possible. So all the other documents we received prior to the meeting, and they're uploaded, and we're working on yours. Okay, proceed.
Thank you. So what this is, again, is a document that's presented to the statewide board, and the pages are numbered there at the bottom right-hand portion of each page. And it just starts off going into the statewide board's responsibilities. There's 3 funding programs. There's the solid waste program that used to be handled by ACO, the Association of County Commissioners, for decades. That was moved over to the statewide board. The ETR fund, the Emergency Transportation Revolving Fund, and then the Circuit Engineering District Revolving Fund, which is from what the state auditor mentioned, which is from gasoline, diesel, and gross production tax on oil. That's the main 3 funding sources of that. You'll see on here, and the next page also, that the responsibilities, training, we have new commissioners coming into office this next year that we provide that, but you don't see anything about the CIRB funding. The only time the statewide board might have touched or had any kind of involvement with the CIRB program was in, I believe, 2019, when we had a federal shutdown of funding, and we used the Emergency Transportation Revolving Fund to expedite projects to a letting because we did not have federal funds at hand. So again, it's a great tool to move projects along. What I want to focus on is there on page 5. And that's why I've handed this document out. There's more information here than what we have time, like I said, to go through. But what was the intent of the CEDs to begin with? Why they were formed, and where we're at today? So historically, when I used to work with the Department of Transportation back in the 80s, the department had a staff of over 3,500 employees, full-time employees. And you see today, that's greatly dropped. And so over the time frames, they had 4 different funding programs that they managed on behalf of the counties. I was in local government division, and that's what we did for the counties. And they provided, mostly at no cost, design, construction inspection was applied back to the project, and safety bridge inspection. Those are the activities that ODOT performed back in the 80s and 90s. Over time, the department has downsized, right-sized, whatever you want to call it, and reduced their numbers. On page 6, you see that the legislation for circuit engineering districts was actually enacted back in 1992. And this is 18 years before the CIRB program was ever mentioned and enacted. In 1998, they hired staff. They hired myself. This is ACO, and there was a 8-year contract with the state auditor's office to start the circuit engineering districts around the state. The whole premise is that counties are by law allowed to have an engineer on staff, but there's only 3 counties to date that have an engineer, and so most cannot afford it. So looking at efficiencies, coming together to talk about issues, look at effectiveness and savings, that was the original intent back in 1992. So I was tasked with forming the CEDs, and they started forming back in 1998. And then the next year, the rest of the CEDs were formed. And one of the first things we looked at, or at least those commissioners looked at performing, was safety bridge inspection. That is a federally required mandated program to go out and inspect every structure that is 20 feet or longer on at least a 2-year basis. That used to be performed by ODOT. They had to pass that, that task on to the consultant industry. The commissioners wanted to task that and bring that in-house. And that was at the time, funded with federal funds and then with county funds, 20% county funds. So Districts 7, 8, and 4 provided that service for their member counties. Page number 7, the statewide board, this Oklahoma Cooperative Circuit Engineering Districts Board, that actual language was passed in 2001. Again, way before the CIRB ever become enacted in special session in 2006. We had then several different activities happened. The CED revolving fund legislation happened, the ETR fund happened, and then the CIRB in the second special session of 2006 with 1176. I moved from an ACO employee to a statewide CED employee, and then I hired Chris back in 2010, and these are the activities there in page 8 and 9, the history of the different programs and the funding that the program then takes care of. The other different slides I just want to point out, they're starting on page 12, and the state auditor kind of mentioned this, but it's a graphical kind of view. It shows you the state apportionments under the gasoline, the 19 cents, the diesel tax, the gross production tax on oil, natural gas, the other penny on fuel tax, and then you'll see that the highlighted boxes there on 12, 13, and 14 kind of shows you those 3 major tax revenue sources of the CED revolving fund. And then the other slides are just showing there then the motor vehicle collection tax, where that's going to, but that has nothing to do with the Circuit Engineering District revolving fund per se, as direct apportionments. A lot of other information in that. I'll let you digest that and have questions about that later. But going back to this map, this single page, if you'll look again down at the front page, you'll see that the ODOT field divisions do not match up with 3 out of the 5 CED districts. Historically speaking, even ODOT divisions, counties moved. Lincoln County didn't used to be in Division 3. Creek County didn't used to be in Division 8. So historically, even ODOT counties, or the counties that were represented by ODOT divisions, have moved in the past. And that's kind of no different than with ACO districts or circuit engineering districts. We started out in the law back in 1992 that this was drafted that they would mirror ACO districts, and they still do today. The latest county that has moved is Canadian County, and they moved from CED 8 down to CED 5. ODOT field divisions, you have 4 divisions that have 9 counties, 3 divisions that have 11, and 1 division that has 1 county. Now, on the back page of this map, you'll see broken down the activities of all the CEDs. It was mentioned that CED 1, CED 6, and CED 5 either has a professional engineer staff, consultant staff, or CED 6 actually just has 1 staff person. But everything that's highlighted there, these activities that the CEDs perform, if they're highlighted, that function is either impacting the CIRB plan or paid with funding with the CIRB plan. So you have some of the CEDs that have elected, 5 of them elected to do design work or do construction inspection. Provide a lab to do the testing. They mirror basically what ODOT primarily did back in the 80s and 90s. ODOT field divisions and then the residencies provided that service. Again, ODOT had to downsize. In doing so, that was pushed out to the private sector, and we looked, or the commissioners looked at savings by bringing it in-house and having that ownership of developing the plans, doing the construction inspection, directly contracting with ODOT to provide that service. Otherwise, that service is provided by the private sector. No different than what ODOT does. ODOT has a design team. They have construction inspection. They do some of their safety bridge inspection. They have recognized having experts there that are paid staff that provides that service benefits them. It's not what it used to be. They outsource a lot, and it's no different than even some of the CEDs that do the design. They can't do it all. They outsource sometimes 60% of the design work. So those activities are listed. There's some activities that are not impacted with CIRB funding. Like I mentioned, safety bridge inspection. There's 5 of them that perform that. Again, it provides them, it's comparing apples to apples, whether a consultant is doing it or whether the CED is doing it. The CEDs are saving money, and saving monies in federal dollars, then that money goes back to construction dollars. And that's the benefit that they're seeing, those different CED districts. The last sheet is more complicated. This is a great, I think, a design flow chart that if I tried to do it normally would fill out probably this wall. And this was developed by the Department of Transportation. And the analogy is, think of each one of these activities on the left-hand side, programming, engineering, selection, design, as your swimming pool. And they're swimming lanes, basically. So you start at the top and go from left to right, and then go back to the other lane. These are some of the activities then that are required, regardless of the funding source, whether there's federal funds involved, there might be some extra steps, but there are tribal funds and CIRB funds or county funds involved or city funds. These are the steps, and they can be long and convoluted, but are required to end up with a good product at the end, which, again, all of us as taxpayers are what we're hoping for, is a good product that will last 15 to 20 years, or in bridges, we're looking at 70 to 75 years. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but I'll open it up to our members first. Any questions of our members? Senator Yek for a question.
Thank you, Senator Hall. Director Robinson, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for being here. You covered a lot of territory, and it's hard to digest all that in a short period of time, but thanks for this handout. My question is on pages 3 and 4, where you list the responsibilities there. I think there are 9 total. So are those defined in statute, or is that a fluid list, or how did you arrive with those specific tasks that are their responsibilities?
Those tasks, the CED revolving fund, the ETR fund, and the solid waste are defined in statute. That's our responsibility, the statewide board.
Okay, I think you mentioned 3, and there are several more listed on here. So is this a fluid list?
The Crosstown Bridge program, that was from Governor Fallon. That was repurposing the 2,000 beams off the I-40 bridge. That's something we partner with the Department of Transportation, 21 staging sites. So that was kind of a partnership deal we have. The training is just something we do. Perry leadership, the commissioners have invited me the last 8 years to be a part of that public forum where they take in different people in the community and educate them on education, county funding, and so forth. And so, for instance, tomorrow or Thursday, I'll be going with NRCS, going down to Hughes County, talking about an issue out there on a project that they have between the county and a farmer impacting there. So things kind of morph into other things as counties have made requests of me or Chris, and we get involved in that way.
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I didn't ask for the last follow-up. So this, for example, you mentioned the governor's repurposing of Crosstown. That program's, is that ongoing, or why is it still on your list of responsibilities?
We've repurposed, there was 2,060 beams, and we transported them in about 21 different county sites. and we've replaced about 190 bridges so far. So there's still almost 1,000 beams that have not been utilized. The trouble or some of the issues with those beams is that they're very tall beams. So if you have a shallow creek and the beam is 3 foot tall, you can't utilize those beams in those locations. So we still have about 1,000 out there.
Follow-up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be my last one. Thank you. I didn't mean to get on that one specifically, but I guess my question, just in general, is this list of responsibilities. So you mentioned that's fluid, so that changes with time. I think when I asked if these are in statute in the beginning, I think you mentioned
The three funds
that are.
The three funds are in statute. It's the direction of my board. Those 8 county commissioners, they direct me and Chris on what they need from us. So that's how we're handled.
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I said that was my last one, but I guess I've got one more. I guess maybe this goes to the last speaker's presentation when he said some of these districts have evolved into areas that were never the intent of the original bill. So I kind of see that with these list of responsibilities, you're saying that grows over time. It morphs into different things and maybe were never intended. So how do you ever step back and say, what is the purpose? What was the intent of this originally? And are we getting outside of what was intended back in 2006?
Well, the original law was 1992 for circuit engineering districts, and the law for the statewide board was 2001. And at that time, of course, we did not have a CIRB program. We looked at, as far as the circuit engineering districts, looked at capturing the safety bridge inspection program. And gained efficiencies and cost efficiencies in that. So as you know, as things change, as laws change, the dynamics and the issues of the counties change, the commissioners decide on what activities they need to be involved with based off of statutes, AG's opinions, and so forth, and dealing with the auditor's office. So the ultimate goal is just trying to provide the service to the counties and Board of County Commissioners and what they direct us to be.
Additional questions of members? Senator Murdoch for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't think you touched on this, but it is a question I have, and just listen to how the funding works for CD districts. And I can understand if you are, let me rephrase that. So the way these districts are funded and the money rolling in, you're pooling each county's transportation dollars to do big projects. Is that correct?
Yes, in the CIRB program.
In the CIRB, yes. And so I can understand a frustration if you're a newly elected county commissioner and the county commissioner you replaced just finished one of these big projects. Wouldn't you see it being kind of frustrating just getting elected, but you've got to wait a certain amount of time before you can do another project because your county just did their big project? Wouldn't that be frustrating for a commissioner?
That would be, because the commissioner is elected on a 4-year term. That would be frustrating.
Follow up?
Thank you. The way the CD districts are set up, and by pooling this money, if a county pulls out, how bad would that affect these other counties on their funding, the counties that have been waiting to do a project, and a county pulls out and takes their money, and this county has been saving their money? How devastating would that be to a county that's fixing to do a project and now they can't?
Can I go a little further?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, the whole, and Mr. Leota mentioned that the whole idea behind the program was pooling resources. That's kind of the mantra, the background of CEDs, trying to pool resources and having a pool of funding like the ETR fund, which is a infrastructure bank we can loan interest-free money to. it's having that resource, because these projects are multi-million-dollar projects. And so when counties are opting out and pulling out, for instance, Oklahoma County, they just built the third longest county bridge on the county system on MacArthur going to Deers Creek schools. That's the wealthiest county that did not have the funding by themselves to build that project. They kicked in $1 million or $2 million, but they needed a pool of money to be able to tap into to build the project. And if you start reducing that pool, then that means reducing your projects, either the size or not being able to do them just to begin with. Because then the availability of funds is already tight, the costs are high, but we're trying to get good quality engineered projects that will last 15 to 70 or 75 years.
Additional questions from our members? So, Mr. Robinson, I just had a few that I wanted to run down through you. Do I have to be a member of a CED to receive CIRB funds?
And that's come up before, and we've answered that. It has nothing to do with being involved with the CED. As far as receiving CIRB funds, Oklahoma, or Department of Transportation's administrative code involves the CED as far as putting the plan together. And that's just the initial fiscally constrained plan, because as we mentioned, we have multiple counties in one division that they all have needs. Everyone has needs. And so there's a limited amount of resources, about $15.5 million per year per field division. And if you have 11 counties in that division, you can see that, you know, projects just can't all fit into a 5-year plan. So that's where the CED initially starts and puts that plan together, but they do not have to be a member of CED to receive CIRB money. The state law does not state that.
So there was, you mentioned it, and there was a line of questioning related to defining your role as executive director of the statewide board. My question would be, would you find it helpful or hurtful if the legislature clearly defined the duties and responsibilities of the executive director of the CED statewide board?
If that's the desire of the legislature, then we'd work with that.
It felt like to me in some of the dialogue that we had earlier that the board kind of moved with whatever the needs were, and so there was no real clear defined role. I mean, it's ever evolving, which leaves a degree of uncertainty, I would think. And so I was just curious, if more clarification of the role of the statewide CED board would be hurtful or helpful. I mean, we don't want to, none of this is intended to slow down the process. What we're trying to do is get the most money down to the counties in the quickest, most transparent fashion.
And remember, the statewide board has nothing to do with the CIRB plan, has no involvement with the plan or the funding.
Okay. So you passed out in your handout the Circuit Engineering District activities with each CED 1 through 8 having a different list of activities that they're involved in. I circled a few, just kind of caught my eye. One CED has a sign shop producing traffic and 911 signs, provides a construction crew, provides a conference center and a training facility. Another one provides a crack and seal crew. Walk me through this. If I'm a county that want to submit a project under the 5-year plan, and I'll work that through my CED. But at some point in that project, there's going to be bidding that goes out for the project needs, right? I mean, where we're going to get the crack and seal, where we're going to get the, I'm assuming the engineering comes through the CED. That's part of the program. Am I required to use, if I'm in a CED that has a construction crew, am I required to use that construction crew as part of the submittal for my project? How does that work?
The CED construction crew has nothing to do with the CIRB program. So in that CED 4, what they use that are very small projects, bridges for the most part, or structures that are under 20 foot. So those are paid with local county funds or through the CED revolving fund. Has nothing to do with the CIRB program. The crack seal program in CE8, again, has nothing to do, they might be going out maintaining crack sealing past CIRB projects that were done back in 2008 or 2009, but that's not funded with CIRB funding.
Okay, but there's always going to be a project that is going to that could be paid for through CIRB dollars that requires crack and seal or something along those lines, correct?
Anything using CIRB funding has to be let through the Department of Transportation.
Right, but I'm trying to get to who's doing it, who could potentially do the work.
As far as crack sealing?
Let's use that as an example.
Crack sealing, that's those county commissioners have elected to have CED staff to do the crack sealing.
So there's been a lot of discussion, and you've corrected me on a couple of different occasions of that the CED board or the CED has limited involvement related to CIRB. So I'm trying to, you can see why maybe myself, I can't speak for my colleagues, might become a little bit confused of the need or the role of the CED or the statewide board in the CIRB process.
Again, the Department of Transportation reached out to the CEDs to help them formulate and initially put it together, the 5-year plan through their administrative code. That involves the circuit engineering districts themselves with the CIRB funding and plan. Some of the CDs actually perform the work that otherwise consultant industry would be doing, the design, lab testing, and so forth. And that's paid directly through the department with that local CED if they're providing that service.
So final question for me, and then if we had any additional questions from the members, we'll certainly take those. And I'll ask Secretary Gatz in his comments to address this as well. So I'm aware that ODOT has a local government staff, and I've been told that that counties, regardless of whether they're in the CED or not, could use that local government staff. I mean, is the local government staff being used for CIRB projects?
At ODOT?
Yes.
Yes. ODOT is using that to move, their staff is using those not necessarily those funds. ODOT performs that at no cost, but they're moving the projects along through their system and putting out for bid.
So related to engineers, so the local government staff has their own engineering. In fact, I believe the engineer for the local government division is here today. So if we have an engineer in local government staff that does that at no cost, but we have the engineers over on the CED side, are we doubling up on these engineers?
Looking at the steps that are involved, and we're looking at, I don't have a copy of the CIRB 5-year plan, there's hundreds of projects. More so than one individual or one CED can actually handle the steps, the design work. That's why they have to actually push up some of that work to the consultant industry. There's no way that Shelley there in local government division could handle hundreds of projects either through design or even ODOT staff could handle that because they have staffing limitations. That's what got the CEDs into the business to begin with.
if this is an efficient program that we're operating under, then I have county commissioners, even in my own district, that, that have had projects on the 5-year plan that 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, in one case, 14 years has gone by, and the project still hasn't been awarded. So where's the breakdown in efficiency there?
Well, once you start dealing with these larger projects and roadway projects, and we've had some large bridge projects take a long time, you start impacting environment, you start impacting right-of-way, utilities. ODOT suffers the same problem, as far as delays. Once you start impacting a larger project, more property owners, it takes a long time to go through the process. Environmental, it doesn't make any difference whether there's federal funds or it's 100% state funding. You still have federal guidelines from Endangered Species, Migratory Bird Act, Clean Water Act that you still have to comply with, and those take time.
Chairman Thompson for a question. Chairman Murdoch, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Director, for being here today. Appreciate your testimony. From Senator Montgomery, he notices on the apportionment chart that the statewide Circuit Engineering District receives $2,817,568 of apportioned money. And his question is, since you are receiving that apportionment, do you also charge fees to the counties for the work that you're doing, and if so, why?
What we have, my 8 county commissioners that serve on my board, they develop a budget, and that budget for this fiscal year is about $388,000. It comes out of the CED revolving fund, and the rest of the funds are apportioned out to the 8 CEDs.
Senator Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of the reasons that a project could be pushed back, say the legislature cut your funding, would that push projects back?
That would have an impact, yes.
Has that happened in the last 4 or 5 years?
Yes, it has.
And did that push projects back?
Yes, it did.
And whenever a project's pushed back and you have to do environmentals, you have to start all the way over, don't you?
It does cause further delays, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this CIRB project, when it was initiated, has been a tremendous benefit in rural areas, I know. I remember back when it took about 3 county workers to get a 40-year-old loader started to load gravel even. So, I mean, this is how far we've come in some of these counties. My question is, what do you consider a major project as far as dollar-wise for a CED district?
That's a great question because we do fund some smaller projects leveraging federal dollars and tribal dollars because an average brick project now is maybe almost $500,000. Back in the 80s when I started with ODOT, it was at least half of that. And that's a struggle for any county to even come up for one site, $500,000 to replace a single span structure. The law says extraordinary. There is no defined dollar amount. Like I said, counties are strapped. Extraordinary for Nowata County would look a lot different than Oklahoma County.
Follow up.
So how would a county, maybe if they wanted to do a project that to tap into that CRB money without going through the district, CED district?
So what might happen then is that they could submit their plan directly to ODOT. I know ODOT then would take that and along with the CED district's plan and try to mesh it all together to make it fiscally constrained. Again, the law says it's divided equally, so $15.5 million is what they have to work with. So I think that's what would probably happen. But Secretary Gatz could probably talk about that.
Thank you. So then that would come out of the money that the CED had allocated to them then?
No, only if the CED is performing any of the tasks related to that project. If that county elects to have, and that CED, again, there's 5 CEDs that can perform design work, for instance. If that county elects to have another firm perform that work, that's their choice as a county. They do not have to use the CED to do that, and it should not impact the plan or the process that they go through getting it through letting.
Senator Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to use, say, Beaver County in this example for this question. I'm looking at Beaver County's getting about $4.5 million. That's 3 districts, and I know it's divided out on road miles. But say they have a $10 million project they want to do. If that county could not pool the money, how long will it take an individual county to do a big project, on average throughout the state, without being able to pool this money?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, if you divide the 120 million up, 231 ways or whatever, you could see the challenge of it would take multiple years to try to save the money up to do a new construction or a major bridge replacement project.
Follow up.
So is it possible that some of these counties may never get a bridge redone if we don't pool it?
I mean, there'll be challenges. I mean, what we see in western Oklahoma looks a lot different than eastern Oklahoma as far as the right-of-way they have and the bridges and so forth. But, for instance, in Grant County, it's not the major bridges as far as long bridges they have to deal with. They just have so many deficient bridges. And so they might do a corridor of 7 miles that might have 5 bridges on it. And, in fact, Cindy Bobbitt did that, Commissioner Bobbitt. So that would make it impossible for her to do something like that, and the need definitely outsources the amount of available funding.
So just to continue along that line of questioning, and we're talking about maybe the difference between pooling and direct appropriation, down to the county. I mean, what in your mind it would be the difference between the pooling process or going to a direct appropriation where the 3 county commissioners just decide that they're going to set this money back for a period of time, and they have a project on the horizon, that they want to do?
They could do that.
Further questions? Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're actually doing pretty good on time. We're just about 20 minutes off. It's not too bad with the questions. I appreciate it. It is an honor, truly, to have Secretary Tim Gatz here, the Secretary of Transportation, the ODOT Director. Secretary Gatz has made himself available to me anytime that I have called. He is quick to come to the Capitol. He brings loads and loads of staff that can answer any question that I could possibly have. I appreciate what you do and the tasks that you have to take care of Oklahoma's transportation system, and I think you do it well. Thank you for being here. I've asked you to be here today to talk a little about the role of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation in the CIRB process. Thank you for being here, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you're recognized. Thank you. Senator, it's a great honor to be here today to visit with the committee and the members about the CIRB program. If I might, Chairman Leota, Commissioner Leota, it's always an honor to be in the room with you, sir. You are one of my transportation heroes. Again, this is all really culminates with efforts of the legislature during your tenure, and thanks to you and thanks to this body for perpetuating the commitment to investing in our infrastructure. It's been critical for the state of Oklahoma. With the CIRB program and how the department works to administer it, a couple of words come to mind, and one is prioritization, because that's really what the CIRB program was founded in, is prioritizing work on the county road system to accomplish improvements that could have never been possible without the resources that have been made available here. Collaboration. The Department of Transportation has a long history that dates way back before the County Improvements for Roads and Bridges program of working with our primary transportation partners and the county commissioners. As elected officials, we collaborate with them on many projects across the state of Oklahoma, inside and outside of the County Improvements for Roads and Bridges program every day. So that's a partnership that's been long-standing. We work hard at it. Don't always see eye to eye on every project, but we work together, and we can usually work through about any problem that may come up. The CIRB program is a little bit unique because it places a tremendous amount of responsibility with the Department of Transportation for administering projects on a road system that we have no jurisdictional responsibility for. The jurisdictional responsibility lies with the county commissioners, and therein lies that collaboration that is so important that we tried to manage to. I've got a personal history with the County Improvements for Roads and Bridges program because I was managing the local government group in our capital programs group in 2006 at the time that this program was created. So it was an exercise in collaboration. Whether you're talking about collaboration with the County Advisory Board that the Department of Transportation works with to make sure we've got an understanding of those challenges that we jointly face. And it was the recommendation of the County Advisory Board that we engage the circuit engineering districts to try to develop that collaborative environment that we knew was going to be necessary to prioritize and select projects that are of the highest priority. And again, that's what this was about. How can we get at these very large transportation improvements that history had proven that the counties could never gather up the resources to be able to accomplish on their own without some assistance from the state? So again, that's where the CIRB program came from. I'll tell you unequivocally, in modern history, it's done more to improve the county road system in the state of Oklahoma than anything else. It's made things possible that would not have been possible without these resources. We do administer it through a 5-year CIRB plan. That was born out of the success of the Department of Transportation's 8-year construction work plan. That's where that came from. It's a managed plan. We revisit it annually. We update it to make sure that everything in there, including project estimates, project schedules, and how those projects are developing, is as accurate as it can possibly be. Also, the CIRB program funds have been leveraged to help the counties with matching requirements on the $28 million in federal funds that's allocated for those projects. And Randy will tell you, there was a time when it was difficult for the counties to put together the 20% match that was required to deliver one of these federal projects. It was a struggle. So again, the CIRB program has fulfilled some of those matching requirements and really leveraged those resources and allowed us to not only do some projects that might not otherwise be accomplished, it's allowed us to work together and make sure that we were stretching those federal dollars as far as they could be stretched. And certainly the tribal involvement is an important part of that also. Again, all started with House Bill 1176. We've developed over time, and we're at about $120 million annually. The funds are allocated equally by law amongst the 8 field divisions. This map is confusing to me. This is the department's 8 commission districts. that's overlaid on the current circuit engineering district boundaries. And again, this is an administrative part of this program that's a little bit challenging for us when we engage with the circuit engineering districts. But again, it's something that we manage to the best of our capability. We try to make sure that the processes that we use, and I'll go back to that collaboration word, are collaborative, that they are equitable above all else. So when you talk about how a county might move in and out of a circuit engineering district, is that challenging? Yes. Will I tell you that the Department of Transportation and our staff do an exceptional job of trying to manage to that and account for it? Yes, we do. So the boundaries don't match. In my perspective, it would be easier to manage the program if they did, but it's not a mandate, it's not a requirement, and it's something that we work with and have worked with since the beginning of this program. Again, this is the 5-year plan in 2024, or 2020 through 2024. Recently, and you can see commitment to bridge replacements in particular. You can see how many road miles we've got there. Most recently, we are now into the 2021 through 2025 plan for county improvements for roads and bridges. That was recently approved by the Transportation Commission. That plan was developed with the cooperation and collaboration of the elected county commissioners, working through their circuit engineering districts and bringing forward their priorities for inclusion into that plan. The 2021 through 2025 plan is a little bit unique because of the recognition of this body of the challenges that the COVID emergency has put on the county commissioners and the resource availability that they have. We work together to be able to provide a $42 million one-time reduction to the counties that would be directed to help them manage their way through this challenge. That's something I think that we all recognize. Sometimes projects of the highest priority in emergency conditions that we're experiencing right now may represent just the ability to get their day-to-day activities performed. And again, I think what the legislature did this last legislative session with taking a hard look at that and extending some understanding to what the county commissioners were going to be faced with was pretty unique and is well appreciated by the counties. So that's the first time that a statutory provision has been introduced into the CIRB program like that. And again, that was primarily due to the focus on the COVID emergency and our legislative efforts to try to help the counties manage through that. Funding history over time, if you look at what has happened down on the county system, and again, this slide illustrates some of that, we've been able to accomplish tremendous things. Huge investment on the county system. And I'd tell you that per Mr. Leota's comments, if you ever get in an airplane and you get above the state of Oklahoma and travel a little bit, what you see on the ground, you can pick these projects out on the county system because they're easily distinguishable. You can see that they are of a larger scope than you would normally encounter out on the county system. So again, a lot of good things have happened since the CIRB's funds inception. And the department has done our best to manage to that. Randy showed you a page in your handout there that represents the process that it takes to deliver a county improvements for roads and bridges project. It's very intensive. It's got a lot of moving parts. Sometimes can be very difficult to administer. I'm often asked, how did the Department of Transportation come up with an 8-year window to manage our 8-year construction work plan? and it's predicated on the fact that a lot of times a transportation improvement project takes 8 years to go from conception to delivery, because you've got to perform environmental, you've got to do the engineering, you've got to buy right-of-way, which can be very, very challenging, even more challenging on county projects sometimes than state projects. You've got to make sure all of the utilities are out of the way of construction, which is extremely challenging. 777 projects that have gone to construction. We've replaced or reconstructed 609 bridges on the county system. We've improved 960 miles of roadway, and we have construction dollars at over $1.9 billion that's been invested out on the county road system. And again, these are projects that are extraordinary in nature. When you say extraordinary, what does that mean? Well, it means a project like this one, Carpenter's Bluff Bridge down in Bryan County over the Red River. It means projects like the project over the Red River in Tillman County that are very, very important connectors. This is going to be a $8 or $10 million bridge. The idea that a county can pool resources without this program to be able to accomplish an improvement like that, you know, the only testament that I can give you to that is that that bridge didn't get built until the CIRB program brought resources to bear to accomplish it. So those are the type of investments that we believe that Chairman Leota, when he envisioned, and the legislature at the time envisioned the county improvements for roads and bridges program, this is a priority project, a major connector, not just between two counties, but between two states. One that could not be accomplished without these resources, and we've got examples just like this all across the state of Oklahoma, where we've been able to go tackle that big project, where we've been able to improve cross-county facility for them, and again, we execute that process just like we do with all the rest of our projects, to the best of our ability, to the best of our delivery protocol.
Senator Rader for a question.
Structure. This particular location, and I'm going to look at Randy because he may have to help me talk through this, but this was born as a railroad bridge, and it was long overdue for replacement. So started out as a railroad bridge, eventually became a county jurisdictional authority bridge.
Okay, so it was built by private funds.
Built by railroad funding, and at some point in history handed over to the county.
So would there be a similar project somewhere in the state that a bridge like that was originally built by the state and then it, similarly to this bridge, ended up in the county hands?
I'm certain that that condition exists on both sides. You know, there are facilities out there on the county system that eventually ended up on the highway system also.
Okay, so that's my question. Would it be more efficient and more expedient to allow those bridges to go back to the state system so that you could do more of them rather than going through the protocol that you have to go through now?
Mr. Chair, I think that the same resource challenges, Senator, exist whether it's on the county system or the state system, because in the Department of Transportation's responsibility for the state highway system, we have a very difficult time managing and maintaining that infrastructure the way that it needs to be maintained given the resources that we've got available. Might there be some administrative efficiencies that could be realized there? Potentially. But again, the same resource challenges that exist for this bridge and a bridge like that, whether it's on the county system or the state system, it would still be difficult to get the resources together to accomplish an improvement.
Further questions of committee members? Mr. Secretary, just one quick question. So you've been, as you reported to us, you've been involved with the CIRB program since its infancy, and worked through it, or worked with it in and around it for the past 15 years, and so you are certainly well versed in the program. And I think you were honest with us when you said it's not a perfect program, but it's had tremendous success over the years. If you could wave a magic wand and make one fundamental change to the program, what would it be?
That's a great question, Senator. I think maybe having better mechanisms to ensure that we're communicating all the way down to the individual commissioner level is one of the things that's really, really important. Because again, we try to collaborate and manage the program through our engagement with the circuit engineering districts. And one of the problems I think that's resulted from that is sometimes you lose that individual contact with our county commissioners. And I think it's really, really important for everybody to understand, the county commissioner's got a very difficult job in government. They've got a massive road system that is very difficult to manage and maintain, and their perspective on what they're facing is really, really important to us. And sometimes I feel like in the department's interactions with the circuit engineering districts, that might get lost. And, again, just the whole structure is something that, we revisit and we try to improve on, but it may be time for us to go back and take a deeper dive into that and make sure that we're communicating appropriately with our elected officials.
Thank you for that answer, and it's really a great segue into the next part of our program. So, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you again for your time and for bringing your great staff here with you today. And I want to say for the record that I'm still pretty disappointed that we lost our engineer up at Senate District 20, but I'm sure I know he's a good member of your team.
I don't know what I would do without Brian, Senator.
Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll move on to the last part of our program. This is the real boots on the ground, and I'm glad the Secretary mentioned the very difficult task that county commissioners across this state have, and the yeoman's job that they do with the limited amount of resources and funds that they have. And this is a good opportunity for your committee, Mr. Chairman, to hear from the county commissioners, and in some cases, right back home. We're going to start today with Muskogee County Commissioner from District 1, Mr. Ken Doak. Ken?
We do appreciate all the commissioners being here, and Commissioner Doak, a friend of mine and one of my commissioners. I want you to notice on the schedule, commissioners, your time has already come and gone. You were supposed to be on at 2:15.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. You were recognized.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys for taking the time to hear us out. I think, number one, I think the CIRB program has been very successful over the years. We'll echo that. Obviously, there are projects that counties could never come up with the funding for. One of the questions that the Senator asked earlier, if there were other bridges throughout the state that were similar to that ended up as a concrete bridge. I will tell you, in Muskogee County, we had one of those bridges. That was a single lane, truss type bridge that was turned into, it was nearly an $8 million project. Took almost 10 years to do, so I have to thank my predecessor for programming that years ago. So again, I'm Ken Doak, Muskogee County Commissioner, and thank you. And one of the first things I learned when I came into office as the commissioner is that the road that is most important to any constituent in the state of Oklahoma is the road that runs directly in front of their house. So the commissioners here will tell you that they deal with that every day. And you guys probably hear it all the time. People are complaining about their roads and say, what can you guys do to help us with our roads? I think one of the most important things that to understand is that when people say that, I mean, they're talking about all roads, obviously. They're talking about state highways and things. But people's perception and experience with roads are the roads they drive every day. So it's the local roads that they're mainly talking about. I think when they say, hey, you know, we have horrible roads. And you'll see kind of why as we go forward. I'm going to show you some statistics. I do want to preface everything that we're about to talk about here. Anything we talk about with ODOT, I just want you to know it's comparative, just to kind of show you, because we have similar costs. I mean, asphalt's the same cost, concrete's the same cost, but there are funding differences, and so I think that it provides a good explanation when you look at it comparatively as to maybe why the county road system is the way that it is today. And so anything that we discuss in regards to ODOT is strictly comparative in nature. So we're not advocating that you take money from ODOT and give it to the counties or anything like that. And in fact, I want to say thank you to ODOT, because what they do with the CIRB program in providing resources and things like that actually stretch how far our dollars go. So it's really sort of an in-kind donation every time we do a project, and so we're very appreciative of that. So one of the things I wanted to go over first was to kind of compare the state highway system versus the county highway system. With state highway, you have about 12,842 miles of road with about 6,800 bridges. And the county highway system, you have 82,000 miles of road, or 82,960 miles, with about 13,606 bridges. And in Muskogee County, to give you an example, a good resurface project with grade and drain is about $1 million a mile. But a lot of counties, probably your average county out there, may get like $1 million a year for 400 to 500 miles of maintenance. And so that's a difficult funding mechanism. As we go forward here, I'll kind of show you what we're talking about. In 2019, ODOT had 86 deficient bridges. By the end of the decade, ODOT should have 1% or fewer deficient bridges, largely because of the 8-year plan and the success they've had with that. In 2019, counties had 13,606 bridges, and basically 62% of the bridges in Oklahoma. Of those, 2,497 of those bridges are deficient. 482 are obsolete. An estimated replacement cost is about $970 million. So obviously, looking at those numbers, the large share of deficient bridges are on the county highway system. 85% of the state bridge deficiency is due to county bridges. 1 in 6 bridges on the county highway system can't support the weight of a loaded school bus. 1 in 6. TRIP, which is a nonprofit transportation organization, recently came out with a report, and Oklahoma has the second worst paved roads in the nation. Number 2. And we have some of the most dangerous as measured by deaths per vehicle miles. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding so you kind of understand how we got here and maybe what we can do differently to maybe get out of that hole. In 2019, 77 counties were appropriated $351 million. But in 2020, 77 counties were appropriated $312 million. So almost $40 million less. I promise you the cost of construction are not going down. We have, increasing costs with concrete and asphalt, gravel, everything is going up, but funding is going down. So it's creating a bigger and bigger gap. And CIRB funding was capped at $120 million. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I know that, we faced some difficult financial times at the state level, and so, the legislature had to do what they had to do. But we've capped that funding in a way to where we can't now keep up with the increasing costs for a lot of the projects that are ongoing. In 2020, ODOT was appropriated about $210 million from fuel taxes, motor vehicle fees, state transportation fund, $4.6 million from gasoline to high priority bridge fund, $290 from income tax, $170 million from motor vehicles in the roads fund, and the roads funding capped at $575 million a year. So when you look, again, comparatively, knowing that a lot of those materials have the exact same cost, I mean, obviously, you know, they're building the roads at the state level at a little different standard than what we are the highway system on the county side, but we still have a lot of the same comparative costs. But the funding is, even though there's 75% of the roads are on the county highway system, funding for the highway system is, you know, nearly a third. So I think that that's an important thing to notice. Also on the county highway system, we have 82,960 miles of road. 75% of roads in Oklahoma are county roads. 70% of those are paved, 30% are unpaved. 18,000 miles are major minor collectors, which are primarily your paved roads versus your gravel roads. You have counties that maintain just under 5,000 miles of city streets and about 520 cities. So counties also maintain the roads for our small towns in many cases. So some of your larger towns will have a roads department, but all those small towns that don't have that, counties are maintaining those roads too. So don't just think of dirt roads when you think of the county highway system. You have to think of it in major collectors and city streets as well, because that's also what counties are doing, which now hopefully you're starting to see why people say, hey, I'm needing help with our roads. We need you to improve our roads, because it's also talking about city streets. We have over 12 million or 12.8 million miles traveled each day on the county highway system. One of the things I have to explain almost every week when people call me and say, hey, I'm paying my taxes, why aren't you improving our road out here? I have to explain that, you know, I'm sorry, but your property taxes aren't really going toward roads. Ad valorem taxes go toward running the courthouse, goes to emergency management services. 75% in Muskogee County goes to our local schools. So property taxes are not funding our road projects. Those funds come from state fuel taxes, gross production, motor vehicle collections. And those funds are primarily going into our lifeblood, which is our maintenance and operations funds that we work off every day. That apportionment that we receive from the state on those fuel taxes are based on area, road miles, and population. In 2019, apportionments varied from Oklahoma County receiving $24,000 a mile to Tillman County, which received $1,851 a mile. And that's an annual amount averaged out. So keep in mind that Tillman County received $1,851 per mile of road for the year. Okay, so that's why I think it's important, you know, hopefully there will be a light bulb come on in a little bit and say, okay, it's going to start making sense as to why the county highway system is the way that it is. But the average apportionment, average across the 77 counties is $4,239 dollars per mile per year. If you take out the largest 4 counties, then the average is $3,837 per mile. So $3,837 per mile per year. I want you to burn that number into your brain for a second, because now I want you to look at some of the costs. To asphalt a mile of road is $150,000 a mile, but we're getting $3,800 and some odd dollars per mile. When you look at just to gravel a mile of road, $25,000 to $30,000 a mile. A short span bridge replacement is $450,000. A new road grader, $250,000. A dump truck, $430,000. A grade drain surface project at $1 million a mile. So when you look at the funds that counties are getting to operate on a daily basis, to pay their staff, to buy fuel, to mow, to cut brush, to stripe the roads, to patch, to chip seal them, or whatever it is that we're doing, we're getting $3,837 a mile, but you have these enormous costs to make improvements. And so there's no question as to why the county road system is the second worst in the nation as far as the road projects or your road surfaces. And there's no question why 1 in 6 bridges won't support a fully loaded school bus. And so the reality when you look at this is that on average across the counties in Oklahoma, we have 1 employee per 27 miles of road. That's on funding of $3,827 per mile. So if you took that $3,827 per mile times 27 miles, we have $103,000 to maintain 27 miles of road. That's $103,000 to cover the cost of payroll, equipment, fuel, materials to mow, patch, seal, repair, reconstruct, and replace county roads and bridges. It's the truth of the matter, guys, it's unsustainable. I was in the banking business before now, so I know numbers. And I've been in office, nearly 2 terms now. And when I first came in, I really thought that we could step in here and do major, major improvements. We could do things that people have never done. But the truth of the matter is that now that I've been here a while, I realize this plan is unsustainable. Our roads will never improve. And I'm going to give you an example in just a minute as to how and why that is. So, again, counties get 2 main sources of funding. First of all is our state fuel tax motor vehicle collections, which goes into our M&O. Our maintenance and operation for counties is our lifeblood. It's how we operate every day. The second thing is the County Improvement Road and Bridge Program, CIRB, which is what we're talking about today. Now, keep in mind, M&O isn't much to cover the area required. We just talked about the $3,800 per mile. But maintenance funds at best. I mean, patching potholes, there's no way you're really going to improve the roads in most of the districts over a period of time. And CIRB is for your larger projects. It's for the $8 million projects or for the projects that are out of reach for the counties in most cases. But the problem in some cases is that CIRB can be somewhat restrictive as well, because we have right-of-way issues. We have to move utilities. We have drainage, federal guidelines, those kinds of things. And so, like in eastern Oklahoma, for example, we get 33 feet of right-of-way. So almost any road project is going to require right-of-way acquisition, moving utilities. And so anytime you're dealing with individual property owners, you're having to pay them for their property. So it drives up the cost of the projects, and it extends the amount of time it takes to do a project. And so that's some of the problems that we deal with. That's not the case in every part of the state, but it is some of the challenges. And so, in my district in Muskogee County, I work with a goal in mind of improving about 6 roads per year. I can normally find outside funding through the tribes, through grants, through federal lands access program, through different sources of money to improve. I'm hoping maybe 6 miles of road per year. But even with that, if you took 6 miles of road per year, and I used our county money for the match to get the projects done, I have about 450 miles of road in Muskogee County. So 6 roads equals 1.33% of my roads. That means that 98.67% of my roads did not get improved this year. It's just not sustainable. If I do everything in my power and go and find as much outside money as I can possibly find, I can improve maybe 1 to 2% of my roads per year. 98% of my roads will remain unimproved. We're just trying to hang on. We're just trying to sustain them. And so I think it's extremely important to understand that funding. When people tell you that they want their roads improved, you need to understand that that is the problem. And I know that the need will always supersede the funding to improve those. But it is important to understand why, I think. So I'm going to show you another problem that we deal with. And this map is a map of statutory right-of-way. When you look at these different numbers, like number 1, for example, in those areas, they get 2 or 4 rods, which is a total of 66 feet. In western Oklahoma, if they want to do a road project, they have the right-of-way to where they can just go put in ditches and pretty much start a road project day one. No issues. They don't have to go buy a right-of-way for the most part. But when you look over on the eastern part of the state, number 2, that is probably a third of the state in coverage area. But the statutory right-of-way there is 33 feet, which means that almost any road project there is going to require right-of-way, moving utilities, and things like that. So the truth of the matter is in that part of the state, because buying that right-of-way, moving utilities, and all that is so costly, that most commissioners in that part of the state don't use that to improve roads. What they're doing primarily on that side is they're replacing bridges. So we've got a much lower percentage of deficient bridges in the eastern part of the state, but our roads are really horrible. And it's because you just can't get there with the time and money that we have available. And if you had to take 4, 5, 6 years per road, most commissioners just say, I don't have time for that on a lot of that. And so that's when you say, how do we get the funds down quicker for projects? Just know that these are some of the challenges that we face. I'm going to give you an example of one of the roads in my district. It's Elm Grove Road. It's a 6-mile stretch of road. It's a major collector. It ends with a state park at the very end of it. And the right-of-way on that road is actually pretty good. It actually has good width and drainage on it. It really needs a grade drain surface project of what I estimate would be around $600,000 if I did the work myself and just paid someone to overlay it. And it could really be completed in a matter of months. Now, because of the restrictions under CIRB, where we need to meet these certain federal requirements or ODOT guidelines, that particular road, we would have to obtain right-of-way on and move utilities. And so after we finished scoping it, they were saying, okay, this project's going to be several $1 million. It's going to take 6 to 8 years to get it done. Man, that's really disappointing when you could do a road that would be a really good solution, shouldered and everything, for maybe $600,000 and be several months into it. And so I think that sometimes it's important to realize if you're going to tweak or have a program that really is designed to get the most mileage out of it, there needs to be some discretion, because the needs vary greatly per county as it relates to right-of-way, as it relates to what our bridges and things, our circumstances at the local level. Sometimes that one-size-fits-all model where you happen to try to fit it into this box is hurting us. We're not improving our roads because we're somewhat limited. And so some of these things, don't get me wrong, there needs to be design standards. We need to have good roads. You need to make an investment that's going to last a long time. I promise you, I deal with roads every day where you look at the surface and just know there's 100 years worth of prior sins underneath that surface from prior commissioners and their administrations. But, so we need to build roads that last a long time, but at the same time, having a little bit of discretion could really make a big difference. Sometimes funds don't get as much mileage out of what we could do. One of the other problems we deal with is that counties are somewhat limited in how much they can do out of force account. We have all this equipment with dump trucks and graders and all of that, but we're prohibited from doing force account on some of that. And so I'm not going to get into the politics of that. I'll let you guys do that. But I'm just telling you that costs us a lot more on our projects when you have counties that could do some of that work. In my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, I think that there could be some improvements by having more commissioner input and or control on some of the planning and approving of some of those projects that go. Having some flexibility in the design and implementation, especially when we face unique challenges in certain parts of the state, I think we could improve a lot more roads. You know, when we look at those several $1 million in the years it would have taken to do the Elm Grove Road project, we could have done 20 other projects with that kind of money in that kind of time. And so I think you have to ask yourself sometimes, is it worth improving this road up to this level, or is it worth improving 20 roads up to this level? Because right now they're getting nothing. And so our roads are actually more dangerous because we're doing nothing. And so I just think that that needs to be taken into consideration. So if there's anything we can do to stretch funds, get more mileage, I think that that would be helpful. One last thing, I'm going to go very quickly because I know I'm probably getting close on time. Disaster recovery, anytime a county has a disaster like our flood, I mean, we all have flooding events just about every year. Counties have to front the money. They have to do all of the repairs. We get 75%, reimbursed from FEMA for eligible expenses. The remaining 25% is supposed to be split between the state and the counties. So if we have $1 million, there's $250,000 that we're out. That $250,000 is supposed to be split between city and county. Well, the problem is that we haven't been getting that state portion. And I'm not sure why. For years, we haven't been getting that state portion. And when a county has a big disaster that, you've already seen the funding issues that we have, I mean, that's a partnership. That's something that we never recover from. That's money that goes out the door that we never get back. And so you take a difficult situation and you make it much more difficult. And so my summary of this would be, look, people want better roads across the state. I promise, ask them. They'll tell you. And that their experience is really based on more local roads. They travel the most. And if you want to improve the perception, then we're going to have to improve the local roads. Not just the dirt roads, our major collectors, our asphalt roads, the roads that are in these small cities and towns. The counties maintain roads in Oklahoma at a ratio of nearly 10-to-1. 85% of the deficient bridges in the state are county bridges. Second in the nation for the worst county paved roads. So, again, funding is paramount. Some flexibility would make a big difference, I think. And, really the state, if the state would kick in on their 12.5%, that would go a long ways. I will say, and I appreciate you hitting on this, the emergency funding that you did from CIRB to our M&O, which is most important to us because that keeps us alive every day, was very helpful. It gave us money to operate on a daily basis, and it doesn't appear that COVID is going to go away soon. And so, I don't know what the need is going to be this year, but we appreciate you doing that last year. And, I don't know if there will be an ask for that again this year or not, but I will tell you that it was very helpful, and we're very appreciative of that.
Commissioner, thank you. And I'm going to ask that the committee just hold on questions. Let's get through these commissioners, and we'll circle back with any questions that you might have. So, Commissioner, thank you for showing up. This will save me from getting into more trouble than I'm already in with the chairman. Next up, Creek County Commissioner, District 2, Leon Warner. Where'd he go?
All right. Been hiding me in the back. So I'm Leon Warner. I'm the County Commissioner from Creek County, District 2. I appreciate you all allowing us to share some thoughts with you today as commissioners. It's to, so to speak, we are where the rubber hits the road. My presentation today is about a lot of numbers too, and it's going to build on and maybe mirror some of the things that Ken has already shared with you. But some of this you may be aware of, some of it you may not be. A lot of it has to do with how funding comes to the counties. So if you look here, this is a very similar slide to what Ken had shown, is that the majority of the assets, the roads that the counties maintain are about 83,000 miles of road and 13,600 bridges. And we maintain that with about 25% of the state funding that goes for both the ODOT and to the county. So it's about 25% of the funding overall. We're going to look at some of these some of the activities that we do here on roads, and some of these Ken had already talked about, but anything to do with roads is included here, whether it's right-of-ways, cutting back brush, doing ditch work, grading, signs, you name it, it's on there. And it takes a lot of resources to do that, obviously. Let's go back here. Some of this is going to be a little hard for you to read, and I had handouts for you so you could look at it. I'm not going to get into the numbers. The reason I had these on my slide was to show you how complex the formulas are, number one, and number two, we've highlighted in yellow what portions the counties receive of these different funds, whether it's the gross production tax and some of the others that we get into here. But it appears to me, when I'm a first-term commissioner, so I'm probably have the least tenure of the guys that are here to talk to you, so I probably got as many questions as I have answers, but I've got a lot of questions, and sometimes it's good to get a good perspective from somebody that's new to the business, right, because I don't have a lot of history here, but I do have lots of questions about things, and when we get into some of this stuff, I look at these. Whenever I started looking at becoming a commissioner, I was told where our funds come from, and it was basically gas tax, diesel tax, gross production tax, motor vehicle taxes. But what I didn't know was that we received this much of it. We don't get a lot of that. We get a little bit of it. And so I did not know that. And to mirror what Ken says, a lot of people think that we get money from the property taxes, which obviously we don't. So these here, this is just, again, some more of this. It shows just the complexity of these calculations and how this money gets to the county. The gasoline tax the same way. And if you look down through these, there are some things in there that I don't really understand. For example, in these things, there's like two different places where population is a part of the equation. One of them is for total county population, cities included, and another one is rural population only. I'm not sure why that's in there. It kind of appears to me maybe be some lobbying that happened in the past, but I don't know that for sure. But it's a big factor in how the funds get distributed to the counties, and you'll see that here in a little bit whenever I get to that slide. Diesel tax formula is similar to the gas tax formula. However, the diesel and gas tax, I am told, was implemented in, I'm sorry, give me just a second here. The taxes were implemented, the current rates that we have were implemented, I believe, in 1987. Randy, is that right? 1987 on diesel and gasoline taxes, the cents per gallon that we are paying today, not counting what happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, just recently.
Yeah. So the same numbers I'm told from 1987 to now. It's not indexed. It's amount per gallon. So that has not changed in years and years, 33 years. And so when you look at that, that's what we're trying to maintain roads with, is that, that antiquated number that's out there for a long time. And recently it was changed, but I don't believe the counties shared in any of that increase at all, and that came to it. So that's an issue. This slide here is the slide that shows the monies that go to each one of the counties in the road miles that each county has. And the disparity, I show this, not that you can see the numbers, but I showed it to show this right here. And if you can see this slide right here, you will see that I did just some calculations on it, and if you'll bear with me, the dollars per mile for the bottom 10 counties, and this is similar to what Ken had showed before, is about $2,400 per mile for the bottom 10 counties. The top 10 counties is 11,612 miles, so about 4 times the amount per mile. And then everybody else is about $3,700 a mile for the other 57 counties. If you look at the lowest total funds that went out, Harmon County actually has the lowest total funds at about $1.9 million, and they have 771 miles of road, so that's about $2,500 per mile of road. The highest is Kingfisher County, who has $17 million per total for 1,544 miles of road, so $11,000 per mile. So there's a huge difference in total funds between those two. The lowest county road miles, if you just looked at the number of miles that the counties maintain, the lowest one happens to be Cleveland County, which has about 298 miles of road, and their calculation comes in at $20,000 per mile. So quite a difference there. And the highest county road miles is Texas County out in the Panhandle, who has 2,500 miles and about $2,500 per mile. The lowest funds per mile is Tillman County. Well, I heard Tillman County earlier, someone talked about them. They had the lowest funding per mile at around $2,000 per mile, and the highest is Oklahoma County with $24,000 per mile. So there's huge differentials in those, and those come from those formulas that we looked at earlier. So I'm not sure why there's all this difference, but it's a huge difference between counties and the amount of monies that they receive. Bridges, we talked a lot about bridges today. I've heard a lot of conversation about them. So there's a requirement that all bridges get inspected at least biannually. So every other year we have an engineering firm to inspect our bridges and provide reports to us. And just to bring it kind of at home to my county, we had, well, I'll get to that in a minute. This little slide here at the bottom here, these little blue lines, you see those are the ages of bridges, and it goes to the bottom there. The bottom there is like 1900 to 1909. There's still a few bridges out there that's that old, and then the next one up is in the 19-teens, and then the 1920s and the 1930s. And if you see the length of the line in the 1930s, there is a ton of bridges out there that were built in the 30s beyond their useful life, and those are going to have to be addressed here before too long. And then on up, we can see where we've been in the last couple of decades where we've done a lot of replacements and stuff. But anyway, there's a huge problem here brewing, as Ken had mentioned before, in terms of funding issues. And in the next slide here this is a slide that shows all the different counties and how many bridges they have and how many are structurally deficient and how many are functionally obsolete. And so for the total state, the counties are around 13,600, which we talked about, and about 78% of those, or 10,000 of those bridges, are fine. But the other 22% are either, like I say, structurally deficient or functionally obsolete and will need to be addressed. And the estimates, the state estimates on this are somewhere just short of $1 billion is going to be needed to replace these bridges that are showing up on here that are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. $1 billion. In my county, this report shows that we have in Creek County, we might be the poster child. We're kind of in between. We have 254 total bridges, of which 53%, 134 are fine, and then the other 120 need to be replaced. That's just one county. 120 bridges at the tune of about $32 million. We don't have that kind of money, so we're going to need help with that. And this, this is why, for us, the CIRB program is very important, because no way could we ever do that on our own. I don't even know if we can do it with the CIRB program. We've got 4 or 5 bridge projects on the 5-year plan, the 8-year plan. I'm not sure if it's going to 10 years, but anyway, it's on that plan. So that's just a handful of these bridges that are out there that we need help with. This is a report. We just got our report a couple of weeks ago on the bridges that were inspected in our county, and there was in my district there were 60 bridges that were looked at, And I went through with our guys and kind of looked at what it would take to do just the work. And this is not bridges to be replaced. This is just maintaining those bridges out there so that they don't need to be closed. But we had roughly our bridge crew of about 3 to 4 people, 50.5 weeks of work to do on these 60 bridges, almost a year, and to the tune of about $500,000 is what we calculated. We don't have $500,000, and we can't spend 50.5 weeks just on bridges. We've got all these other things we talked about that we needed to do. So there's a lot of, when we look at that, we're going to have to prioritize that and go to the bridges that have the, the worst conditions. But a lot of these we won't get to. There's just no way. There's not enough time. There's not enough money to get to 50.5 weeks of bridge repairs. So, some things that, in my perspective, to look at is the CIRB funding is definitely needed. It needs more money, not less money. We need more money. Take the caps off and maybe figure out a way to get more. But and then the overriding problem for most counties, I think, maybe just a handful that have $20,000 or more dollars per mile. Maybe they don't have the same problems we do. But for most counties, there's a shortage of funding. We just don't have the money. And as Ken mentioned earlier, it's a day of reckoning ahead. We can't get there. There's no way that we can, with the money that we've got, make everything happen that needs to happen. And I'm a new commissioner, and I'm kind of novel. I've done a lot of things myself, to be honest with you, that to try to make ends meet. We've worked with other counties to share costs in projects. We've worked with OTA and some projects locally to try to get some roads done. We've worked with 5 to 6 miles a year is about what I do as well, and every one of those, almost everyone, maybe 90% plus, have some kind of a grant attached to them because we just can't do it on our own. And I have about 450 miles in my district, and I've got about half paved and half gravel. And if we do, if I'm doing 5 or 6 miles and I've got, say, 250 miles of paved road, you can see that that's not going to work. That's 40-something years recycling to get to it. A road does not last 40 years, so there's got to be something looked at in terms of how this funding gets to these counties. I see too much disparity currently between this county funding, the $2,000 to some county and some $24,000 to others. It makes no sense to me. Maybe these tax formulas need to be looked at. And there's a lot of, as you look through these calculations, there's a lot of hands in the till, and a lot of them have nothing to do with roads, and I'm sure they're needed to balance budgets, but is that the right place for it to come from? Serious discussion needs to be had on the bridge replacement limit, $1 billion worth of bridges that need to be replaced in Oklahoma, and how do we get to that? And as Ken said, and I agree with that, we need to work together. We need to communicate together, work as teams, and try to figure out how we can get over this hump. So,
thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate you being here. And forgive me if this seems rude. I'm trying to move on, but appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we'll quickly move into to Senate District 20 commissioners. So you're really in for it now, folks. We're going to go with Logan County Commissioner District 1, Marvin Goodman.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you. I'm Marvin Goodman. Good afternoon. I'm very much honored to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different than my brother commissioners have talked about. My expertise is one of looking at statutes and regulations and things like that. I've been in state, county government, federal government almost all my life. I was in the military for quite a while, was in the federal government side. So one of the things that I look at is the difference between statutory requirements and administrative requirements, right? So I've got a lot of my questions have been answered already this morning and today after listening to some of the other presentations. But what I'd like to do is offer maybe some ways that we can compromise and all of us kind of get a little bit of something that we all need. Being county commissioners, I agree with the two fellows that's been up here earlier. We don't get enough state funds for our county roads. My county happens to be one. We get about $3,000 per mile per road to do our maintenance. So we're one of the richer counties compared to some of the others. But still, there's a lot of stuff that we can't do. But one of the things that I want to talk about is the statutes and the intent of the legislature. What's the intent of the legislature previously? Maybe not so important previously, but going forward, what's our intent as far as county roads and bridges are concerned? And that's what I want to get into. So with that, I'll be talking about three different programs that can be changed. One of them will be the county design criteria that the OCCEDB and ODOT work together on to determine what criteria our projects have to be designed to in order to use state CIRB funds and also with federal matching funds. It's one of the areas that you'll hear a lot of people complain that some of our projects get over-engineered. And this is one of the areas that I think might be able to use some tweaking, if you will, from the legislature. The other area would be the actual CIRB language itself and how we might be able to compromise. Some of you might remember back in 2015 we ran some legislation up here and it didn't quite get around both chambers, but it was to send the CIRB funds back to the counties. And it got a lot of talk, and I learned quite a bit from that one. And that is, just like you hear today, a one-size-fits-all program just doesn't work for everybody because we're not all the same. We don't all have the same issues with our constituencies and that sort of thing. One of the biggest challenges that I see with having these bigger programs and bigger projects is that if you build me a $12 million bridge, the day you give that to me, I'm very grateful for it. You turn it back over to the county, and now it's my responsibility to maintain it. Now I've got a $12 million bridge, and I've got $3,000 a mile to maintain my miles, my infrastructure. I can't maintain that $12 million bridge. There's no maintenance tail that goes along with it. From a business standpoint, being a business guy, that's something that I think about. One of the things that I also want to talk about is how we fund our CIRB projects, how the funds are distributed. Maybe we can look at that a little bit and do that in a little better manner that makes a little more sense from a business case. And what I mean by that is the rhyme and reason that we devote or give money to counties should have something to do with the assets that they're trying to manage, right? So I try and look at this from an asset management standpoint. And so when we're given funds to maintain an asset, it should be based on the number and types of assets that we've got to maintain. So a county that's got 300 miles of road shouldn't get more money than a county that's got 1,200 miles of road, especially if half of those roads are paved miles, and I mean it just costs so much to do that. So and then the last thing that I'm going to want to talk about as far as changing is how we handle emergency needs, right? So if we're able to compromise and use some of these CIRB funds are county projects that the county commissioners might be able to have a little more input into how those are used, and maybe even allow county commissioners to let those projects themselves if they're of a dollar figure and don't require the use of federal funds and things like that our friends at ODOT are really, really good at helping with. Then we should be able to try and figure out a way to fund these big projects when they become emergencies, right? So emergency projects, how do we fund those? Well, there's already a pool of money there. It's called the ETR fund. And I think that's something that we could look at as well. Now, all of these are just recommendations. This is not something that I say that we've got to do, but I just offer these things up, right? So the first thing, there we go. The first thing we want to talk about is definitions, right? So we've already talked about what constitutes the state highway system and the county highway system. Commissioner Getz Secretary Getz did a great job of that. So we've already been through that part. Governing bodies, the state versus county, we all understand that as well. This is the one definition that you'll hear used a lot by county commissioners, and that's force account or construction on a force account basis. That's how we do our daily business, is with force account. That's what we use that M&O money, that $3,000 a mile per year that we get in Logan County to buy our road graders and our gravel and all that stuff to take care of all the roads and bridges that we have. And we use a force account to do that with. That's basically known as. That can have a bad connotation in some circles. They say, well, you're going to use a force account. You hear people talk bad about that, but that's actually how county commissioners do business. And that's how we make a living. And anyway. The other thing that I want to talk about right quick is the language, legislative language. When you read our legislation that talks about counties and roads and bridges and all the funding and all that stuff, that you'll see the word shall shows up quite a bit in there. Well, that gets interpreted in a lot of different ways. And where we have offered changes to the legislation, we've changed the word shall to must to connotate a restrictive or mandatory connotation there as well. So when we get to talk about legislative intent a little bit, I wanted to point out that in Title 69, Roads, Bridges, and Ferries for the state, there are two articles that we want to talk about. Article 5 is the state highway system, and that's actually where the County Improvement for Road and Bridge Fund is located, is in the state highway system. It's interesting, and it's already been mentioned that the responsibility for the county highway system belongs with the county commissioners, but this program is in the state highway system. Article 6 is the county road system, and we're going to talk in depth a little bit about Article 601, 01-2, and -3. Again, I'm going to bounce through this legislative intent because we've already been through this already. So basically, the last part of the legislative intent, it talks about the State Highway Commission and directors responsible or the custodians for the state highway system, and that the legislature further intends to bestow upon the Board of County Commissioners similar authority with respect to the county highway system. So this cooperative effort is most important, that the counties and the State Department, Highway Department be able to work together to work through these issues. Looking back, through the County Bridge and Road Improvement Act, the County Primary Road Improvement Act, the Oklahoma Rural Inventory Act, and the County Road Improvement Act. Those are all under the county road system, all under Chapter 6. A lot of those have been repealed, the titles taken out. And I mean, the County Primary Road Improvement Act doesn't even exist anymore, but it's still in there. All those have been repealed. Those are all things that the state legislature has done in the past to help, try and help counties. They run for a little bit and then they get repealed, and some of these are quite old. My point here is that a lot of things have been tried in the past, and it seems like we have a challenge learning from past issues and mistakes, but we're all going to try and help fix that, right? So the county highway system, we'll start off with Title 69, Section 601, like I talked about. It highlighted here, it says it shall be the duty of the Board of County Commissioners in each county to construct and maintain as county highways those roads which best serve the most people of the county. That's a legislative mandate to the boards of commissioners. That's what we are required to live and die by. So we take that, I take that $3,000 a mile, and I have to figure out where to spend that to affect a positive outcome for the most people that live in my county or my district. And my other brother and sister county commissioners have to do the same thing. That's what we do on a daily basis. And we, again, you guys have seen, we don't get enough money to do that. So it also goes on to say that for these purposes, we're able to use any other money or value or item of value derived from any agreement entered into between the Transportation Commission, federal government, and other political subdivisions, yada, yada, to do that job, right? So this statute allows counties to cooperate with each other for large projects if we so desired to do that, right? So if we had a bridge between counties, two counties could get together and work together to do that, to pool some resources. But again, at $3,000 a mile, it's hard to pool any resources at all when you're, scraping the bottom of the barrel just to buy gravel. Back to the force account, right? So here's what we do. This is how we spend a lot of our money, is repairing roads. What you see here is one of our county operators. We're compacting a push-out. I know everybody in here has seen a push-out before, right? That's where the water gets under the road and the clay gets wet, and it becomes a big old clay push-out, and it squishes out the side of the road, and people drive in the opposite lane to avoid that, and it becomes a very dangerous issue. So the way to repair that is you dig down, you dry it out, you dig out the wet stuff, you pack a base in there, and that's what these fellows are doing. You pack the base in there, and then you put another cap on top of it. And we do this type of work before we overlay an entire mile, right? So we'll take a mile that's been depleted like this because we can't keep up. So we take the worst first and go after it with the most people on it, the most traffic, and we'll complete that. These guys will patch that. We'll put aggregate up to about 4 inches. Put a 4-inch asphalt cap over that, and then we'll overlay the entire mile after we patch it. In this way, we get the best bang for our buck, so to speak, out of our force account money and our O&M money. One of the other things that we have to do with force account is maintain our bridges. Here's one that this has happened to this bridge, is piled up. It gets a debris pile so big that you can see it from outer space, right? Which isn't hard anymore with Google Maps, but I always thought that was an interesting comment. You could see it from space. But we have to take these pilings out. It piles up, and this was a bridge that was built with federal funds and with the help of ODOT, and we appreciated the bridge. But what happens is it piles up, water comes over the bridge, washed out that abutment, And we had to go back in with a force account, put concrete in there, and seal that back up. This is one of our main roads in my district. This is Broadway that runs between Highway 33 over by Guthrie and Waterloo Road, which separates Edmond from Logan County. So this is a 10-mile stretch. We've had rock trucks and big trucks have been traversing that road for years. I remember driving it when I was a young man. There was a nice railroad track down there we used to use for a jump. It's still there, but I don't drive that fast anymore. My point is over the years, though, this road hasn't had a lot of attention. And so we took the worst mile first, and this year we're going to overlay 2 miles of this road. We've already finished this first mile off of Broadway, off 33. And what we've done is we went out and have a 6-month contract with an asphalt company to do this milling work for us, because the county can't afford to buy and operate a milling machine of that size because they're quite expensive. They're about 3 times the cost of a road grader. So we contract with them. It's a 6-month contract. They come out and they do that. They lay an asphalt patch for us, and they charge that by the yard, by the square yard. So it was quite expensive, but it was something that needed to be done. So we got all of those things patched, and then our laydown crew, our county owns the laydown machine. We patched and laid down asphalt and then had it striped. That 1 mile, to have that fixed, all those push-outs and those craters, cost about $200,000 from the time we started till the time we got it fixed. That's something that came out of our O&M funds, and we've been saving up for quite a while to do that, as you can tell. And again, because we spent $200,000 on that 1 mile, there are several miles in our county that get ignored over the next 4 or 5 years because of that. Now, we'll go out and scrape it with a road grader, but it doesn't get any fixing. On a county road system, the cost to maintain 1 mile of a gravel road is somewhere between $8,000 to $12,000 per year per mile if you're going to do it right. So you got to do base stabilization. You got to do ditch management. You got to keep the water flowing. That's the biggest thing is to keep the water from washing the thing away. If you do that over a 12-year period, there's a picture of what the roads look like on there after 12 years. The cost to maintain a mile of asphalt road is a little more expensive, and it has to do with what you just seen with our force account, where we had to go in and mill out the bad spots, reestablish the base. They also require crack sealing. At about 12 to 15 years, you need to do an overlay to seal up the cracks again to keep the water from getting in. That freeze-thaw cycle will cause a problem. And so we need to do that. So to maintain a mile of asphalt road is somewhere between $22,000 to $38,000 per year per mile for asphalt roads. Under the county highway system, in section 601, it requires the Board of County Commissioners to come up with plans and specifications to be used for county roads, right, that'll be accepted on the county highway system. This is not in conflict, but it's also in addition to what we'll talk about in a bit of the state mandated requirement to adopt plans as well.
Commissioner, can I just pause you just for a quick second? So I'm running up close on a hard stop 4 o'clock deadline. I'm about to lose my chairman to another meeting. So I know you had some proposed legislative change. If you could just maybe get to that, and we can give an opportunity to the last 2 commissioners to speak.
Yeah, all right. I'd be happy to do that for you, sir. Okay, so the first thing on the design criteria we wanted to look at was to eliminate the funding program reference in section 689, right? it pointed to a program that had been superseded, right? A funding program that had been superseded that's no longer there. So I just skipped through those slides that are in your packet. We wanted to eliminate the conflated language in section 601 and 689. That's the statute that talked about the county's responsibility to maintain standards and this other standard for using state highway funds. We wanted to ask ODOT to let county projects using federal highway funds. We want them to continue to do that. They do a good job at it. They understand the federal requirements, and those things change an awful lot. Establish the need for minimum design requirements when using federal funds. We think that sometimes we over-engineer things. I'm a big one to ask, where does the statute say that, right? I know people that know me have heard me say that before. So when I'm told that we have to do this because the federal design requirements or the federal statutes say this, I ask to see those federal statutes. I ask that we kind of look at those again and design, have our requirements at the minimum level, not what we think would be a nice to have, right? And then provide the county the option to approve and remove engineering firms from the ODOT maintained approved vendor list. I think this is important because as we establish relationships or issues come up, there are good engineering firms and there are ones that aren't so good. And I think the counties need to have the option to say, no, we don't want those folks designing our road. They didn't do good on the last two projects we had. And then to specify that the county road design standards are only applicable and required when county projects use federal highway funds. I think that's an important compromise. If we could get to that point to where we can use our county design standards for county projects and the design standards in 689 for federal funds, I think that would be a good compromise. That'd be a good start. And that'll show up later when I talk about CIRB program fund changes in just a second. And this is the proposed language changes for that, so I'll let you guys chew on that. So here's the language in the state highway system, CIRB legislation, right? This highlights the key areas where it says that the projects will be done at the highest priority as defined by the Transportation Commission. I would really love to be able to see those definitions. Right now, the administrative code points us over to the CIRB or the CEDs to ask them to do that kind of stuff. Sorry. So here is that map again. The way that dollars are apportioned out in the 8 divisions, over in Division 1, you have 8 counties, and if you divide up the $15 million that goes to that division, that's $1.875 million per county. And then at the bottom of that, there's 33 counties that, if you split up between the 33, get 1.363 million per county. It's kind of a strange way to define that. The other issue is when the CEDs get to manage that. CED 8 up there has 14 counties in there, and if you do the math, and I've done that, I can get with y'all later. That's quite a lot of money. It's about $43 million over a 5-year period that they manage as far as CIRB funds. I think that we can get by with it. This is our 5-year plan. I won't talk too much about that. I did want to point this one out, though. Just in my district, in southwest Logan County, I've got about a $10.3 million funding gap just in asphalt road maintenance that needs to be done today. And it's just going to get worse. I have the 3rd fastest growing residential area in Oklahoma. The 2nd fastest is over in that part of the world over there. But Piedmont, I think, is the 2nd fastest. That area over there is. So what we'd like to do is to offer that we restore the county commissioners' exclusive jurisdiction over the county road system, right? Let us be responsible for our roads and bridges. Let us work with ODOT where it makes sense for them to manage projects and let projects out and let the counties do that as well. That's what we're recommending here under Title 69 for the CIRB plan. And here's the proposed language for that. One of the allocation of the monthly funds used up here references the same method that's used today to allocate funds, the 35 or 40% of the CIRB funds that goes to our O&M today. I believe that's as close to being a business case as you can get as far as asset management goes. It looks at the number of miles, it looks at what type of miles they are, it looks at rural populations and that sort of stuff, so that's about as close as we can get. We get on to, I talked about circuit engineering districts a little bit. So if we split up and allow the counties to use some of the CIRB money on our own projects and use some for some federal projects with matching funds, then the argument comes, what do we use for emergencies, for true emergencies, for these big $10, $12 million projects? Well, we've got an emergency transportation fund here already to do those sorts of things. What I would propose is that we might look at putting some additional funds into that, building it up a little more, and then, all right, and then having, keep the language to have the OCCBD develop and manage that. I would look at trying to remove the natural gas vehicles out of that because, to be quite honest with you, there's not too many of us out in rural Oklahoma that are buying a fleet of natural gas vehicles. It's hard to find a place to fill them up. And then there's some other changes there. And here's the proposed language change for that. And, sir, with that, I will yield back. Thank you for your time.
Commissioner, thank you. And I apologize for being relatively quick with that. I think all of us around this table will take these suggested legislative changes and pour over them. So I appreciate you being here today. Pawnee County Commissioner Dale Carter from District 3. Dale?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Hall. Appreciate it. All the members, this opportunity to speak. First of all, I'd like to tell you how important I think the CED and the CIRB plan is to the counties. The reason why it's so important to the counties, it's the only funding we have, because we don't have adequate funding in our M&O account to repair these roads and bridges that need repairing. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about bridges. We have biannual bridge inspections by qualified bridge inspector. When they've inspected all the bridges, they come back to us and they brief us on all the discrepancies and all the deficiencies that's within that bridge. Tell us what needs to be repaired. Just like Commissioner Warner said in Creek County. He hasn't got the manpower or the money to correct all these deficiencies on the bridge. So what happens? It slides. 2 years later, it's on the same picture, on the same deficiencies that's identified. So, okay, it's a minor problem. Maybe 2 years later, it becomes a major problem. So what does the county do? County commissioner, he comes into the Board of County Commissioners and says, man, I need some funding. Well, we haven't got it. So what happens is then ODOT gets notified. ODOT comes to the Board of County Commissioners and says, okay, this bridge is bad. We're going to close it down within 6 months unless these repairs are made. I haven't got the money to repair them, so what I do, that's when you put it on the CIRB plan. And it may linger, this bridge is closed. It may linger on that CIRB plan for 8 years because it's got to have all the NEPA, right-of-way acquisition, and all this other. And it takes time. They usually do it in increments of 1 year. Okay? I advocate, and I'm one of the few, I'll admit that, for this funding or the CIRB to come directly to the Board of County Commissioners and let us spend it accordingly to what the priorities are that we need to get fixed. I think it'd be I know I'm in the minority on that, but there could be ways that we could place it in a 105 account, could be spent on nothing except roads and bridges. When a few years back, I believe it was in 2012, the CBRI money that ODOT held was returned to the counties. At that point in time, Pawnee County built 3 bridges out of that money that we had because it was a substantial amount. I don't recall what it was. We were the first county to use the crosstown beam to repair a bridge. That bridge was, I don't know exactly what the length was. It was in a different district, but we had it built by a local contractor for, I think, $165,000. I can promise you if it went on to CIRB, it had been closed for 8 years, and it would have cost between $700,000 and $900,000. That's a lot of money we're talking about. If it was in the hands of the Board of County Commissioners, I can promise you it would be spent a lot wiser than that. There's no use, if we're going to keep the same footprints in these bridges, we don't have to get a NEPA. If we don't use federal funding, we don't have to have a NEPA. It just makes common sense to me. I'll give you a good example on roads. I had 1.8 mile. There was an article, let me back up. There was an article in Tulsa World, September the 21st, talked about roads and bridges. This article pretty well nailed it. Gene Wallace, our executive director from MACO, was interviewed on it, and so was Commissioner Doak. They had some real good comments in there. One of the comments was, is the reason we don't have roads on the CIRB plan is because of right-of-way acquisition. Well, I thought I was going to, a lot of counties only have 33 feet. Some have 49 and a half. Some have 66, and I happen to be one of the ones that have 66 feet of right-of-way, so I thought, I'll get that road built, no problem. I faced a lot of mad neighbors, especially when it was surveyed and these stakes were right outside this gentleman's door within 5 feet, and we got 66 foot of right-of-way. I explained to them, the situation and what we had to go through, and why I pulled the project is I got in touch with the right person at ODOT, and she told me that if the people don't want the project and the county commissioner don't want it, that I had the authority to remove it from the CIRB plan. I did that in May of this year. In August of this year, I just completed a 2-inch overlay on that road for $167,000. They had budgeted $4 million for that road. And it even went up another $1 million when I talked to the road designer. He said, man, they're wanting $1 million to move that water line from Water District number 2. $1 million for 1.8 miles. I finished it in August this year for $167,000. Granted, the asphalt dealer is only about 20 miles from where I was having it poured, so we got a real good deal on the asphalt, $61 a ton. For a lot of asphalt for that. All I'm asking you guys to consider is just consider it, you know, let the Board of County Commissioners have a chance. Let's get rid of that black eye we got back in the 80s. Give us an opportunity. I think we deserve it. Maybe I'll take care of my money a little bit better than other people do. I like to look after the county's money the same way. And I promise you, if we get the money, as long as I'm in office, we will look after it. I want to kind of close and saying that it's been a pleasure to have this opportunity to address you gentlemen, and I really thank you because of the work you do and everything. It's just a very nice pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you being here. We'll wrap up this evening with Noble County Commissioner, District 1, Jason Keenholz.
Well, thank you, Senator Hall. The advantage of going last, I guess, is everybody else has pretty well covered what I was going to say, so mine will go pretty quick. Senator Hall asked me to speak about our CED, what I liked about it. I'm in CED 8, western part of Oklahoma, northwestern. You know, I'm pretty fortunate in the CED that I have. Some of the functions that my CED provides, I know not all of them do that. We have engineers on staff that do all of our plans for all of our projects, not just CIRB projects, force account, BIA, whatever we have, they do the plans for it. Some of that is outsourced, I understand, because they can't get to it, but that's about a 20 to 30% cost savings to the counties having them do our plans for us. They perform construction inspection on all of our projects. And then on a bridge project, that's about a 7% savings, road projects 4%. They perform all the H&H studies. When we have a disaster, flood disaster, that is a requirement for FEMA, Federal Highway, for the help. You have to have those studies in order to even apply for that. They manage the 5-year plan. They manage the crosstown beam program that was spoke about earlier, the crosstown beams from I-40 brought to the counties. I've built several of those bridges using those beams. Works out great. Bridge inspection. That is a huge deal in my county. In my district, my CED district, we have our own inspectors. They're done by statute every 2 years. It's about a $300,000 a year savings having them do that. The material request program, which is funded by 12.5% of your CBRI, not CIRB, CBRI account of each county. They have a sign shop. You know, they produce all of our signs for us. They're pretty well at cost to the counties. Whatever they cost to build, there's no profit margin for the CED in that. And they have a crack seal program. That is a fairly new program that we've started. And the reasoning for that is some of these CIRB projects that have been done already are starting to need maintenance on them. Crack sealing is a very expensive maintenance on
on roads. I did 6 miles, CED did it for me. I did 6 miles north of Red Rock, and it was $70,000 to do 6 miles, just to seal the cracks. And that was using them. If I would have hired a consultant, it would have been twice that much. So we're using them on some of these CIRB projects that are needing maintenance, that we're not, in another 10, 15 years, we're putting those projects back on the CIRB plan to be redone because we didn't maintain them. Everybody's talked about the amount of money that they get per mile. I've heard 3,000, I've heard all kinds of numbers. I can tell you I'm lower than that. In my district, I have the 6th biggest district in the state of Oklahoma. I have 715 miles that I have to maintain. You get very creative to maintain that stuff. I mean, we recycle whatever we can recycle to reuse. It gets pretty drastic on that. When I tell people that I have 715 miles to maintain, it just kind of goes over their head. You know, they don't think about that. But if you put that in perspective, from my house in Red Rock, Oklahoma to Nashville, Tennessee, it's 694 miles. It's a long ways to go with one guy. My crew's great. I can't say enough about them. They work for me. You know, it's a struggle. I mean, everybody said that. It's no different in my district. As far as CIRB projects, we looked at one of my CIRB projects that was recently finished last year, and the number of steps that have to be gone through to get that. There's an average of 37 different steps from being put on the 5-year plan to the signing of the construction contract. Now, you get past that, there's even more steps. But from the putting on the 5-year plan to signing of a construction contract, it averages 37 different procedures that you have to go through. So it takes time, a lot of time, to get those done. I do get frustrated with that. I do. But I realize there is a process and there is a standard. I've learned to work with it. It was mentioned earlier about commissioners, new commissioners. Senator Murdoch brought that up about new commissioners getting elected, and they may not get a project for 5 or 6 years. I'm one of those commissioners. I haven't done a project that I've put on the 5-year plan yet. I was fortunate enough that my predecessor, the ones that he put on there, were ones that really needed to be done, and those are the ones that are getting done now. So I was fortunate in that. I can't speak for everybody, but those are some of the things that I've gone through. You know, I've heard about bringing the money back to the counties. I'm not in favor of that, for one, because I don't have the manpower in the staff, or just my district attorney isn't going to do all the contracting and the legaling and all that stuff that ODOT provides for us already. The bidding, everything that has to be done for a CIRB project, ODOT provides that. RDA is not going to do that. I mean, I'm not going to ask them to do that because that is a monumental amount of work that they provide. I'm happy with the CIRB plan the way it has gone. I'm happy with the CED the way it has gone. Like I said, I'm very fortunate in mine. I feel like we have one of the best directors in the state. He works his butt off for us, and I appreciate that. A lot of this other stuff that I had has already been said. I'm not going to go over it again. So if anybody has any questions for me. One thing that I was going to say, a couple weeks ago, there was a House interim study over the powers and responsibilities of county commissioners. If you guys haven't seen that, Commissioner Bobbitt gave a very good overview of what we deal with, and I encourage you to go watch that. So, anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for letting me run a little over. and I'll turn this meeting over to you in just a second. I thought it was important that we hear from the county commissioners themselves, and I think if you consider all the 5 speakers, each one of them had some real emotion about what they have to deal with day in and day out. They've got a large constituency, a lot to take care of, and not a whole lot of money to do it. And so I think it was important that you all get to hear, and the folks at home get to hear what your county commissioners are out there doing for 75% of the road miles in the state of Oklahoma being county roads. It's a monumental task. I'd yield to questions by anybody. I know it's been a long day, and I really appreciate your attention through this study. Senator Murdoch for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably not so much as a question, because I know we're running out of time, as a statement. I myself go to the CD district in Alva quite a bit, and I just think that more senators need to go and inform themselves what's going on in their districts, and go to these CD districts and get informed on what's going on with your county commissioners. And that's the only statement I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Murdoch. Further questions? Let me just conclude by thanking all of our speakers that came today. I very much appreciate it. I think it was a worthwhile study. I also think that we can see that this is a complicated, difficult procedure. The funding formula is complicated. I know that that Commissioner Goodman touched on it, and several others. It's a complicated process. We'll be taking a look at that over time. In the meantime, Secretary Gatz, thank you for your time, and I hope to be able to work with you and your department on some possible changes that would help the funding flow a little smoother, a little quicker, with a little bit more transparency. So again, thank you all for coming. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you letting me close.
Senator Hall, thank you very much for setting and establishing such a fine meeting for all the presenters. We're indebted to you, Auditor Byrd, Commissioner Leota, Director Robinson, Secretary Gatz, Commissioner Doak, Commissioner Warner, Commissioner Goodman, Commissioner Carter, Commissioner Keenholz. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for your clear and presentations. Thank you for the handouts. This is very, very helpful. I think I would like to speak for all the senators here. If there's questions, please reach out to us, either via email or telephone. I don't know if I can speak for the representatives, but I would assume that would be the same as well. This is important to us because it's important to you. It's important to the state of Oklahoma. So yes, we do want to hear what it is that is going on in your part of the world with this subject. So with that, we will stand adjourned, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.